Chapter 44-62. Look at her tense expression, but she's actually more curious than us, right? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at Mo Lien with a smile. The latter snorted at him and strode off to chase after his wife. This Tianji mystic realm is very strange. It's better to be careful, Princess Wushuang said seriously. Let's find the others first. Eldest brother. Princess Wushuang thought of something and quickly caught up to him. She said loudly, I seem to have forgotten to tell you. The old man told us before that this place has a weapon refining cauldron even better than the heavenly forging cauldron. Our goal in this mystic realm isn't to find anything else. Our objective is to find this weapon refining cauldron. Mo Lien was taken aback, but then she asked with a smile, you came here to find the weapon refining cauldron? Of course. And Wushuang raised her head and looked at Arbor's expressionless face with a grin. Sister-in-law also came here for this. Xiao Mu's face was stiff and icy as she explained in passing, I came to slap ancestor Tianjizi's face. Everyone couldn't resist bursting into laughter. The little stoic cast them a sidelong glance until Mo Lien chuckled and said, what are you laughing at? What's so funny? You're not allowed to laugh, not allowed to laugh. Master, Feng Chongqing and the others are just up ahead. The group of 5 sprinted in the direction the little Treant pointed. After a little less than an hour, Princess Wushuang, third young Master Fu, and Sir Jojo's faces all darkened. Where are they? They're just up ahead. Qiuqiu said resolutely, this mystic realm is huge. Don't be discouraged and keep running. You'll probably encounter them after running for another 2 hours. Everyone, why didn't you say so earlier? Princess Wushuang cursed exasperatedly. She raised her hand to release a 6-winged bird and beckoned everyone to hop on. The little Treant sprawled on the expressionless Sir Jojo's shoulder with a solemn expression. Fly. The 6-winged bird lifted its body and flew into the sky, its wings gliding as it flew forward at an extremely fast speed. This mystic realm is really something. The little Treant was blown by the strong wind. Its entire body was shaking, and its leaves were rustling. Princess Wushuang turned around and almost burst out laughing. This thing's thin arms and legs were slightly disheveled in the wind, and the few sparse leaves on its head were rustling. This image was simply comical. Shut up, Arbor said expressionlessly as he pulled it off his shoulder and held it in his arms, blocking the wind for it. The little Treant was so touched that tears welled up in its eyes. Its pair of bean-like little eyes looked at Xiao emotionally. Master, you're so good to Qiuqiu. Arbor patted the top of the tree. Can you feel it? It's coming, it's coming. It's right in front. Do you see it? Princess Wushuang was standing below the neck of the 6-winged flying bird. Therefore, she could see the chaotic battle of the 5 spirits at first glance. The 6-winged flying bird circled twice in the sky, but it could not find a place to land. However, some of the people in the chaotic battle below had already noticed their arrival. Someone screamed, enemy attack. All kinds of 5 spirits' power, rising and falling, immediately smashed toward them. The 6-winged flying bird's dodging speed was also very fast. It flew back and forth in the colorful spiritual power, dodging countless attacks, and let out a shrill cry. Chapter 44-63. Ming Yasi's sword rose and fell, instantly chopping down an unlucky bastard who didn't know better. When they looked up, they saw a large bird with 6 wings circling above their heads. It just couldn't find a place to land. The group of idiots around them seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. Blinded by their impulsiveness, they threw water spirits and fire spirits at the bird as if they didn't cost anything. It's the Holy Maiden and the others. Feng Chongqing turned the hilt of his sword and smashed away a lunatic pouncing man. He looked up and said, Heh, I can't believe you're still in the mood to go easy on them. Young Master Ding dodged and chopped off a round head. These people are heavily poisoned. They've completely lost their minds. We can't let them live. Crown Prince Rong quickly stepped forward and waved at the bird in the sky. Jojo. They're all here, and Wuxia looked down, then turned to Arbor and Emolian and nodded slightly. In the next moment, Princess Wuxia quickly put her six-winged bird back into the spirit beast space. The five of them descended from the sky and landed beside Rong Qing and Feng Changqing. Feng Changqing turned to look at Arbor and said happily, "Holy Maiden, are you all alright?" "We're fine." Arbor expressionlessly knocked down a young girl pouncing at him and sent her flying with a kick. "What's going on?" "I don't know. We just broke the illusion array and reunited. Then we ran into these people. They all seem to have lost their minds. They pounced on us, bit us, and tore us apart. They looked like they wanted to fight us to the death." Arbor frowned and slapped the back of a fat middle-aged man. The latter staggered and fell to the ground, but before he could get up with a roar, Xiao Mu kicked him in the back. It was as if he had been crushed by a large mountain, and his whole body heavily fell back onto the ground. Arbor's gaze fell on the man's back. There were some burnt talisman ashes on the man's back. Arbor raised an eyebrow and muttered to himself, "Puppet talisman." When he said this, everyone looked around vigilantly. "There's a talisman master here." Arbor stretched out a finger, disdain in his eyes. He took some unburned talisman ashes from the middle-aged man's back and rubbed them between his fingers. Crown Prince Mo immediately took out a clean handkerchief and pulled over his wife's small hand, wiping her fingers in a considerate manner. A talisman master from the Tianji secret realm has sneaked in. Arbor stretched out two fingers and drew a mind-tranquil talisman. Talismans like this one usually, so many talismans as T-Tess. Feng Zhangqing, Ming Yasi, Rong Qing, and Wuxia, and the others were naturally aware of her identity as a grand talisman master, but they rarely saw her draw talismans in the air. Her movements were smooth and graceful, and her fingers moved like a dragon without the slightest pause. The same thought floated in everyone's minds: watching the young crown prince consort make seals was simply a kind of visual pleasure. As the mind-tranquil talismans appeared out of thin air, rays of talisman light fell onto the backs of the people around her. All the people who were tearing each other apart lowered their hands in confusion. Arbor glanced at them. He only had a vague impression of a few of them. They seemed to be disciples of the aristocratic families of the divine prefecture. He didn't recognize the rest. "Who are these people?" Princess Wuxia asked in surprise. Third young Master Fu's mouth twitched. "Shuang. We met them at the entrance of the secret realm." Chapter 44-64. Oh. And Wuxia nodded and glanced at the crowd in confusion. So it's them. How did they end up like this? Arbor was also puzzled. Her hands didn't stop moving as she inserted mind-cleansing talismans into everyone's bodies one by one. Not long after, the middle-aged fat uncle who had been injected with the mind-cleansing talisman woke up. He sat up from the ground and looked at Arbor and the others in confusion. Suddenly, he bounced up and asked, "Why are you here?" He touched the bloodstains on his chest and screamed in fright, "Why am I bleeding so much?" Feng Zhangqing and the others couldn't help but roll their eyes. "Uncle, stop screaming. You were all controlled by the puppet talisman. That's why you surrounded us and attacked us. After that, they even started killing each other." Crown Prince Rong hurriedly said, "Look at the knife in your hand. There, did it land on that person's butt?" The fat uncle turned around and saw that his weapon was indeed on the butt of an unlucky person behind him. That unlucky person was lying face down on the ground. It was obvious that he was dead. The fat uncle screamed in fright and hurriedly pulled his knife out of the person's body. He couldn't hold the knife steady and it almost fell to the ground. He screamed, How did this happen? I already said that you were controlled by the puppet talisman. Young Master Ding rolled his eyes speechlessly. Miss Chiao saved you with the mind-cleansing talisman. Stop screaming. The plump uncle recovered his senses in a state of shock, and he turned to look at Xiao Mu and Mo Lien, who were standing a few steps behind him. The little crown princess was still drawing talismans in the air and pushing out one talisman after another. When she saw the fat uncle looking at her in horror, she only glanced at him indifferently. After using the last mind-cleansing talisman, Arbor's body swayed slightly. Mo Lien hurriedly reached out and held her in his arms. Jojo. Mo Lien frowned slightly, his handsome face full of disapproval. To put it bluntly, the life and death of these people had nothing to do with them. He was not happy to see his Charles exhaust his talisman power to save these ungrateful people. It's nothing. It's just that I've used too much talisman energy. Arbor patted the back of his hand to comfort him. He frowned and said coldly, it's not to save them. I just don't want the 3 continents to become even more chaotic. If these people all died in this secret realm at the same time, then if nothing unexpected happened, the clans, mercenary groups, and clans that they belonged to would definitely cause a great deal of trouble. At that time, they would suspect and fight each other, and the entire world would definitely become even more turbulent and uneasy. Mo Lien's heart softened. She stroked her hair and said in a low voice, Jojo, how can I help you recover? I'm fine. My talisman energy recovers quite quickly. I'll be fine after resting for a while. After saying that, he reached out and took out a pill and swallowed it. What are you doing? And Wushuang reached out to block the fat uncle who was walking forward. Are you looking for trouble? No, miss, you misunderstood. The fat uncle looked embarrassed. He stammered, Miss Chiao saved us. What Miss Chiao? That's my sister-in-law. She's called the Crown Princess. It was indeed inappropriate to call her the Crown Princess when they were out training. She thought for a moment and said, call her Madame Mo, as the Crown Prince's #1 fan. Princess Wushuang felt that she had to protect her brother's sovereignty. Yes. The fat uncle nodded repeatedly. Madame Mo, thank you for saving us. Chapter 4465. Words cannot express my gratitude. I am a member of the De Fei mercenary group. Although my cultivation is lacking, but in the future, if Madam needs any help, just say the word, and I will definitely do my best to help. And Wushuang couldn't help but smile, thinking, I didn't expect this chubby middle-aged uncle to be such a sentimental person. Arbor's eyes flickered slightly, and he turned to look at the chubby middle-aged uncle, nodding lightly with an indifferent expression. Soon, many aristocratic family disciples, mercenaries, and rogue cultivators who had regained consciousness also came forward and cupped their hands to express their gratitude to the little crown princess. Some people's expressions were a little unnatural. They probably recalled how they had secretly cursed the little crown princess in their hearts at the entrance of the secret realm, and now they felt very embarrassed when they thought about it. Everyone, does anyone else remember what happened? Feng Zhangqing asked in a low voice. Why were all of you affected by the puppet curse? Who cast this curse on you, do you have any recollection? Hearing this, everyone shook their heads and looked at each other. Someone recalled, at that time, we were able to enter the Tianji secret realm with great difficulty, and we were all very excited. When we came in, we only saw a scene of white mist in front of our eyes. Yes, I also saw a scene of white mist. After that, I don't know what happened to the others. I only felt that my head was dizzy for a moment, as if someone had punched me a few times. Yes, did you feel the same? Indeed. The chubby middle-aged uncle scratched his head. Everyone, just now you said that we were affected by the puppet curse. But may I ask, can this kind of curse only work if it is used on us face to face? That may not be so. Arbor looked at the chubby uncle who asked the question and said expressionlessly, a great curse master can cast a puppet technique thousands of miles away and take a person's head with a snap of his fingers. Everyone couldn't help but gasp. Arbor saw that they were scared out of their wits and were all dumbstruck, so he continued, however, to prepare so many puppet curses is definitely a big deal. That's right. There are over 100 people here, and all of them have been affected by the puppet charm. And Wuxia came to a sudden understanding. So the person that utilized the puppet talisman definitely possesses more than just these few talismans, right? Arbor nodded again, agreeing with Wuxia's opinion. Indeed. He must have at least 1,000 talismans in his hands, which is why he can use them so freely. Madame Mo, do you think the person who cast the spell on us is still among us? That's possible. The disciples of aristocratic families, mercenaries, and rogue cultivators immediately burst into an uproar. They looked at each other with vigilance in their eyes. But I don't think that's very likely. Arbor's expression was indifferent. Just now, I gave each of you a mind-cleansing talisman to remove the puppet spell on your body. In other words, all of you should have been affected. If the person behind the scenes wanted to control you, it's unlikely that he would also be affected by the puppet charm. In that case, wouldn't that person be unable to properly appreciate what the people under his control looked like now? Then who could it be? The group of people were like headless flies, their faces filled with nervousness. Will this person come to harm us again? Chapter 44-66. 5,0218 people were different from each other. Arbor glanced at the chubby uncle and nodded with an honest expression. I think so. Everyone instantly looked as if the sky was about to fall. Like ants on a hot pan, they paced in front of Arbor's group. What should we do? They came to the mystic realm to ask for a lucky treasure, not to lose their lives. Arbor glanced at them and decided not to scare these timid fellows. Calm down. Actually, you don't have to worry too much. A talisman master needs talisman power to send talismans from thousands of miles away. Arbor said calmly, someone must have injected a puppet talisman into you the moment you entered the mystic realm. According to my estimation, the talisman master's talisman power should have been almost depleted. It will take some time for him to recover. Madame Mo, then what about you? You should have used up a lot of talisman power when you dispelled the talisman for us. Now, have you recovered? The little crown princess nodded very honestly. Prince Mo stood at the side. He wanted to give his little wife some advice, but she had already nodded in response. Sure enough, when he looked at the faces of those fools, they looked even more hopeless than if the sky were about to fall. The youth who spoke earlier cried out, Crown Princess, you recovered so quickly. It seems that the talisman power didn't take long to recover. Arbor blinked. She suddenly felt speechless with these people. Why were they so stupid? Was she the same as other talisman masters? These people always used her as the standard. Were there differences between people? Mo Lien coughed lightly and quickly changed the topic. Previously, you moved together in a large group with a clear target. Others only needed to use their divine perception to search for you and you could be assassinated from afar. Why don't you split into small groups? Prince Mo said in a low voice, moreover, that charm master shouldn't be able to recover so quickly within a few hours. Split up and act separately. Consciously restrain your aura. The other party definitely won't be able to catch all of you in one go. Unless they met again, they couldn't blame anyone but themselves for being unlucky. Stay alert and don't trust others so easily. That was all they could say. Since everyone had chosen to enter the mystic realm to train, they should have expected to encounter all kinds of dangers, right? Young Master Mo, Madam, everyone still wanted to say something, but Feng Zhangqing stepped forward and cupped his fists. Everyone, you'd better split up as soon as possible and pay attention to restrain your aura. Let's go. Arbor, Mo Lien, and the others nodded and followed Feng Zhangqing's footsteps. They turned around and left, leaving behind a large group of people. They looked at each other, and for a moment, they were shrouded in gloomy clouds. "Sister-in-law, I think those people just now seem to want to follow us." And Wuxia touched his chin and whispered, "Was I mistaken?" "No." Arbor shook her head. They were all smart people. Naturally, they could see the desire in those people's eyes. However, would they bring these burdens with them? Besides, they were originally relying on their own ability to search for treasures in the mystic realm. If everyone found treasures together, would they still need to draw their swords and fight to the death? "Don't worry about it." Arbor's expression was indifferent. "We've helped where we can, but we still have to walk our own path." Chapter 4467 50219. How sad. They were not related to each other. She felt bad about troubling others, right? Xiao Mu's original intention was to be herself. Who is it? Who is so generous to put so many puppet charms on people? And Wuxia muttered to herself as she walked. "Don't think about it if you can't figure it out." Arbor waved her hand. "We will meet them anyway. Just think of a way to deal with them." "That's true." Princess Wuxia giggled. She held her hands behind her back and skipped forward. "There's no use thinking so much. This person dares to put puppet charms on people from thousands of miles away. I think it must be." She suddenly paused and looked behind her warily. Everyone else also stopped in their tracks and turned around to look. There was nothing behind them. Only a gentle breeze blew by. There seemed to be no movement at all. Arbor curled her lips. Several ebony blue talismans floated from her fingertips and flew over. Dong, dong, dong. The air that was hit by the ebony talismans started to distort. Third young Master Fu and Princess Wuxia threw out a few fireballs and water balls, hitting the fluctuating air. Then, they heard a few muffled sounds. The distorted air instantly calmed down. "Since you are so interested, why don't you show yourself?" Arbor said coldly. More than 10 ebony blue talismans flew over with a flick of her finger and landed in the air around them. Along with the layers of ripples in the air, muffled sounds could be heard one after another. Suddenly, a person rolled over from the front. He rolled very smoothly and looked like a big fat ball. Master Jojo expressionlessly stretched out his leg and kicked hard. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched as they watched the fat ball fly out with a "shio" sound. It drew a beautiful arc in the air before finally landing on the ground with a "dong" sound. Arbor's movements were also very fast. When the fat ball landed with a thud, she had already slapped a teleportation talisman on herself. She was already in front of the fat ball. Everyone was speechless. As expected, they saw someone's next move. He kicked the fat ball back again. That chubby ball rolled all the way to Mo Lien, Feng Chongqing, and the others with a grunt. Only after Mo Lien lightly waved his sleeve did it stabilize its figure, and it rolled several times on the spot before coming to a stop. This fellow had been kicked back and forth until he was dizzy. Even though he had stopped, his head was still spinning in circles. A pair of small eyes stared blankly at the row of 8 people standing in front of him. His expression was as innocent as it could be. Fellow heroes, what are you all doing?" Xiao Mu strode up to the fat ball and flicked her fingers in the air, taking out a pure gold club with barbs from her inner world. "What are you doing?" The fat ball let out an ear-piercing shriek and immediately covered its chest with its hands, making an indescribably terrified expression. Arbor's face was cold. There's nothing in this world that can't be solved with a beating. Everyone was speechless. Sister-in-law's words make sense. What should we do? Princess Wuxia burst out laughing. Her eyes rolled and she looked at the unlucky fatty on the ground with a smile. Old fatty. What old fatty? That fellow looked insulted. I have a name. Oh. May I know your name? Chapter 4468. This humble one is called Tian Tuzi. Everyone, they glanced at the bald patch of Mediterranean on the fat ball's forehead. They felt that this name was a bit strange. Baldy Tian, could it be that you're Senior Tianjizi's son? Princess Wuxia looked at him in astonishment. Arbor, who was slowly walking over, creased her elegant brows when she heard this. She stared at that person with an odd and severe gaze, and the barbed golden club in her hand suddenly grew larger. It weighed heavily in her hand. This large club looked too textured, scaring Tian Tuzi into trembling non-stop. He repeatedly shouted, "Junior sister, junior sister. You, don't act recklessly, junior sister. I'm your senior brother. Little junior sister." Everyone looked at the fat ball with strange gazes. This fellow was too fat. He struggled for a long time before he finally crawled up from the ground. His belly and waist were so thick that he couldn't even see his own feet when he stood on tiptoe in front of them. This fat ball, who was about the same height as a little girl and looked to be in his 50s, actually called her junior sister. This made the group of young masters feel disgusted, and at the same time, they had an impulse to beat him up. Is little junior sister someone you can randomly call out? What are you randomly calling out for? Who are you? I'm Tian Tuzi. Little junior sister, calm down, little junior sister, don't hit me. Tian Tuzi raised his hands pitifully and repeatedly shouted, "Little junior sister, I'm your senior brother, really. Senior brother, senior brother, senior brother. We're from the same sect, same origin, same master. Hey, don't hit me. My master is Tianjizi. You're not Senior Tianjizi's son. You're his disciple." And Wuxia and Arbor asked one after another. Tian Tuzi hastily nodded like a quail. I'm his disciple. No, I'm not his son, I'm not. As soon as he said this, everyone could feel the gloomy pressure of the chilly wind around them lessen considerably. The gloomy low pressure on Sir Jojo's body finally receded a little. "Why are you calling me junior sister? Confess honestly." The little stoic demanded coldly. Little junior sister, ever since you contracted with the Tianji treasure blueprint, I received your message. And half a strand of your consciousness. Arbor was stunned. His eyes became even gloomier. When did you take my soul consciousness? Her divine sense had unknowingly fallen into the hands of an unfamiliar person. What if he was used by others? Arbor could not imagine it. Mo Lien and He Chen's expressions turned even colder as they stared at the fat ball. "You have another copy of the Tianji treasure map? Why don't you take her consciousness?" No. This Tianji treasure map was created by his master. Master said that the power of the Tianji treasure blueprint was too great, so at that time, it was split into two. The one in junior sister's hand is a child map. There's also a master map. It's been with master for a long time. Why master once said that not everyone can form a contract with the Tianji treasure blueprint. Innate talent is one, and bloodline is another. Junior sister, you not only have outstanding innate talent, but you must have some kind of bloodline connection with master, right? Don't misunderstand. No, I didn't take half a strand of junior sister's consciousness. It was absorbed by the master map when the Tianji treasure map was contracted. Junior sister is related to master by blood. Chapter 4469. Moreover, she's master's final disciple. We definitely won't harm her. The fat ball repeatedly waved his hands in agitation. Mo Lien looked at him suspiciously. Why were you sneaking around just now? Speak. Princess Wuxia roared from the side, giving the fat ball a fright. He shrunk back and promptly confessed honestly, I sensed, when he saw Ma Yingchen and Mo Lien looking at him, this fellow shuddered and hastily said, no, it was I who discovered that the mother map of the Tianji treasure diagram sensed something. I almost couldn't control that mother map and make it fly out of the tomb on its own. Tian Tuzi hastily said, so, I guessed that little junior sister must have accidentally stumbled into Master's mystic realm. I was very agitated, I especially wanted to take a look at her. This fat ball timidly glanced at the little stoic and stammered, I don't have any ill intentions, I just wanted to stealthily take a few glances at little junior sister inside the invisibility formation, I wanted to confirm her identity first. He stammered as he spoke, but he still fully explained the cause of the incident. The little stoic said expressionlessly, although I contracted the Tianji treasure diagram, I don't know the slightest bit about mechanisms and concealed weapons. At that time, she was completely clueless about the mechanisms and concealed weapons in the Tianji treasure diagram, so she threw it all to the two youths to learn. Speaking of which, Ancestor Tianji Zi's true disciples should be Mo Lien and Duan Yu. Didn't that mean she had to slap these two idiots in the face? Only then could she fulfill Senior Xuanji's dying wish. The little stoic pondered it. It was still a bit difficult for her to slap these two people's faces. But although it was difficult, it didn't mean it was impossible. She had to slap their faces. She was a person who placed great importance on promises. She had to carry out her promise to the end and fulfill Senior Xuanji's dying wish. Our dear Mo Lien stood on the side and inexplicably felt the temperature drop around her. There was a wisp of evil wind brushing past her boom. Caught off guard, Prince Mo was kicked in the butt by the little stoic, and he stumbled forward a few steps with a stupefied expression. He turned his head around and cried out aggrievedly, "What are you doing, wife?" And Wushuang and third young Master Fu were also dumbfounded as they stared at the person who had suddenly raised his foot to attack. On the other hand, the eyes of Ming Yasi and young Master Ding, who were watching from the side, lit up slightly, and they chuckled as they called out, well done. I got beaten up. The little stoic didn't waste words with her husband. She rummaged around in her inner world, took out an ordinary rolling pin, and swung it at her husband's butt. What goes around comes around, and there's always this day. You didn't expect that there would be a day when you would be spanked by me. Why did he ask her? There was only one reason, and that was that it wasn't appropriate to beat him up anywhere. Let's slap her face. If we disfigure that beautiful face, we'll really be heartbroken. She couldn't hit his waist. A man's waist was very important. All he could do was hit his buttocks. I'm following Ancestor Xuanji's orders to beat Ancestor Tianjizi's disciple. This guy shouted as he beat him up. Mo Lien was extremely innocent, and she turned around to dodge as she ran. Wife, that guy called you junior sister. Your Ancestor Tianjizi's personal disciple. We have the Tianjizi treasure blueprint as proof. Less nonsense. Are you convinced? Arbor chased her husband back and forth with a rolling pin in his hand. Don't even think about running away. Chapter 4470. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was about to choke from laughing. He clutched his stomach that hurt from laughing and repeatedly waved his hand. All right, quickly stop. I'm about to die from laughter. Junior sister. Stop for a moment and listen to this older brother first. The atmosphere instantly became a bit distorted and strange. Tian Tuzi expressed that he truly couldn't understand. Hey, Baldy, hurry and make them stop. What's going on? Was it you, was it this old punk who fed my sister-in-law some bewitching poison? Princess Wushuang grabbed the old punk's chest and berated him angrily. What Baldy? Tian Tuzi's small eyes widened in anger from embarrassment. This humble one is Tian Tuzi. I'm telling you, I didn't do anything. Loosen, loosen, loosen. Miss, how can you be so rough? The little stoic chased after him with several large strides and swung her rolling pin at Yen. Do you concede? Hurry and kneel down and kowtow to Ancestor Xuanji and shout 3 times that Tianjizi's disciple can't defeat Xuanji's disciple. Say you admit defeat and say you're wholeheartedly convinced. Hurry and speak. Everyone, with a helpless expression, Prince Mo reached out and pulled the little fellow, who was bouncing after him, into his arms. Do you concede? The little stoic huffed beside his ear with a taut face. I concede, concede, concede. Mo Yen nodded repeatedly, exasperated. Tianjizi's disciple admits defeat and is wholeheartedly convinced. If you concede, then why are you running? The stoic faced him expressionlessly and said as if she was reading a book, truly traveling far and wide only to find what you're looking for without even looking for it. Everyone's mouths twitched. The little stoic continued to recite, I didn't expect that the successor of the Tianjizi treasure blueprint would be Tianjizi's personal disciple. You. Present, present, present. Your husband is present. Mo Yen nodded as he revealed a resplendent smile. Wife, you tell me. I will beg for mercy when I should, kneel when I should, and lie down when I should. You can do whatever you want, as your husband is yours. Arbor's face did not fluctuate at all, but the corners of his mouth couldn't help but raise from the bottom of his heart. Stop being so glib. She turned her head, and Mo Yen also turned her head to look at Peng Qiu. She threw him a gloating look, Senior Brother Baldy, good luck to you. I'm impressed. This brother also surrenders. Before Qiao Mu could make things difficult for him, Tian Tuzi, this guy, had no moral integrity at all and immediately surrendered by raising the white flag. What kind of joke was this? Could it be that it would look better to be beaten up by junior sister and then admit defeat? Get out of the way. Jojo Sama slapped Mo Yen's paw to get him to let go. She turned around and cupped her hands in the direction of the horizon. She then said in a dignified manner, Ancestor Xuanji, your spirit in heaven must have seen this, right? I've completed the 3 things I promised you. In the future, we'll go our separate ways. If you don't come looking for me, I won't trouble you. After finishing his speech, this fellow raised 3 talisman papers in the air, which ignited and swayed without wind. The venerable peach blossom immortal floated to her side with a smile. The more he looked at this fellow, the more amused he was. He couldn't resist teasing, Jojo, were you burning joss paper just now? What joss paper, talisman paper? Arbor gave him a sidelong glance and was in a rare mood to explain. Transmission talismans. She stretched out 2 fingers and gestured at the sky. Xuanji received it, so she definitely won't bother me again in the future. What taking care of the dragon clan? What helping the merfolk? Don't mention it again in the future. Chapter 44-71. The venerable peach blossom immortal was slightly taken aback before chuckling cheerfully. He said softly, what a silly child. Your unilateral decision to draw a clear line between you and Ancestor Xuanji seems amusing, but in reality it's filled with melancholy and helplessness. Who knows? When you meet the dragon clan of forgetfulness again, perhaps you'll meet with weapons. You've made it clear to Ancestor Xuanji long ago that they're completely separate. If you really do fight in the future, there's no need to restrain yourself. Don't worry, Senior Xuanji isn't that kind of dim-sighted person. If she knows in the netherworld, she definitely won't make things difficult for you. Shichen comforted him softly before turning to look at the fat ball, Tian Tuzi. I have something to ask you. Tian Tuzi shrunk his neck and hastily nodded. This one will definitely tell you everything he knows. Feel free to ask whatever your esteemed self wants. Little junior sister actually managed to find Master's mystic realm by chance. This is definitely fate. Little junior sister expressionlessly looked at him and splashed a bucket of cold water over him. It wasn't by chance. It was Senior Haiguang who guided me here. My trip this time was specifically to slap Ancestor Tianji's face. Tian Tuzi, little junior sister. Arbor spread her fingers. Don't call me that. Although I contracted the Tianji treasure blueprint, it's just a divine weapon to me. It's for my use. There are many theories on concealed weapons and mechanisms inside, and the learner is someone else. Ancestor Tianji's personal disciple is hubby. It's Duan Yu. Tian Tuzi nodded repeatedly but still asked, little junior sister, do you want to meet master? Arbor was silent for a moment before slowly nodding. Okay. The Tianji treasure blueprint had saved her from danger several times. Speaking of which, Ancestor Tianji had unknowingly protected her more than once. Tian Tuzi instantly looked gratified and murmured, little junior sister and senior Xuanji also have a lot of connections. From what little junior sister said just now, she had completed the 3 things she promised. Presumably, little junior sister and senior Xuanji also had some kind of promise. Arbor didn't answer. He-chin curled his lips slightly and looked at the fat ball. Let me ask you. Did you create a bunch of mechanical puppets in JoJo's style? After Ming Yasi, young Master Ding, Rong Qing, and the others fell into the secret realm, they had never seen a golem that looked like JoJo, so they naturally did not know about this matter. Hearing Yuan Shichin's question, he looked at Arbor who was standing at the side. Sir JoJo's expression did not change at all. His expression was calm and steady. Young Master Ding couldn't help but burst into laughter. Who the hell knew how much the stoic face was on the verge of a mental breakdown right now? How could anyone tell from his expression? You did it? Mo Lien's cold eyes stared at Tian Tuzi, why aren't you telling the truth? Tian Tuzi nodded frantically, I'll confess, I didn't say I wouldn't confess. Those mechanical puppets, were created by me. I think that master will definitely like this little inner disciple. I made a few of them according to her half-wisp of divine sense. So that's how it was. Mo Lien mused inwardly, when Jojo contracted with the Tianji treasure blueprint, he was 12 years old. No wonder that bunch of Jajas were all at this age. After the more I made them, the smoother they became, just, Tian Tuzi peeked at little junior sister's expression and repeatedly said with a heavy heart, little junior sister, I didn't do it on purpose. These mechanical puppets originally weren't so nimble. After your half-wisp of divine sense floated out of Master's tomb. Chapter 44-72. I don't know why, but they actually engraved a spiritual imprint on each golem's forehead. And then they acted like that. Little junior sister, why you didn't encounter them on your way here, did you? They're usually very obedient. Perhaps they were too excited to see you, otherwise they wouldn't have courted death in front of you. The fat ball's voice became lower and lower. Seeing little junior sister's expressionless face, he became more and more uncertain. Little junior sister's expression, was she happy or angry? How many? Lord Jojo grumpily roared at Tian Tuzi. 123. Tian Tuzi shrunk his neck, as if admitting his mistake. Why little junior sister, why if you don't like them, why then you can melt them all. Tian Tuzi looked like he was about to cry when he said this. These years, guarding the Fekta hidden realm had been very hard and lonely. Ever since he had this group of lively little junior sisters, his days had become much more interesting. Although little junior sisters often went out to cause trouble, they didn't guard their master's mausoleum and wandered around the hidden realm. They also liked to plunder their master's hidden treasures and hide them in their own little treasury, causing him to have to move those things back to their master's mausoleum every few days. However, they were so full of life and vigor that it made people happy to see them. Little junior sister, they're just a little lively, but they're actually quite capable. Tian Tuzi hurriedly said. If you think they're noisy, then put them in your spatial artifact refining space. That way, they won't be noisy. Arbor glanced at him and suddenly threw out a purple talisman. Talisman light swirled, and the purple talisman brushed through the air, heading straight for the fat ball's face. Tian Tuzi's face was blank and pitiful, but his fat body moved quickly. Just as he was about to flash past, Arbor had already recalled the purple talisman flowing with light. You don't know talisman arts? Tian Tuzi cried out pitifully. Little junior sister, our master isn't a talisman master, where would he learn talisman arts? Arbor nodded calmly. If her opponent was a talisman master, he would have unconsciously used a defensive talisman to block her attack. This was an instinctive action during a talisman master battle. Under such a fast battle, senior brother Pang Qiu could not react at all, and would definitely carry out the most instinctive reaction to resist. However, the other party didn't. Instead, he quickly dodged. Arbor thought to himself, this senior brother Pang Qiu looks quite sincere. He shouldn't be the charm master who attacked everyone before. I'm sorry. The little stoic's probing was quick, but she was also quick to apologize. I previously discovered the existence of curse practitioners in the mystic realm. Do you know about this? Tian Tuzi was a little stunned, then he shook his head and nodded, Junior sister, although I don't know the origin of this charm master, as long as he is still in this secret realm, I have a way to find him. When the little stoic heard this, her eyes brightened slightly. How do we search? Master's mausoleum is in the main control room. You can see the entire situation in this secret realm. Does junior sister want to go now? Okay. Arbor nodded. They want to come with me. Of course, of course. This fat ball was naturally very sensible and nodded repeatedly. Although he had lived in seclusion for who knew how many years, he still understood some of the ways of the world. Chapter 44-73. Although it was his master's mausoleum, he really shouldn't bring so many random people to disturb it. But since it was little junior sister who suggested it, then he had no reason to object. Thinking about it, master shouldn't mind. Moreover, Tian Tuzi was very clear about his current situation. Not only did little junior sister not trust him, little junior sister's group of relatives and friends probably didn't trust him either. If he insensibly suggested to let everyone wait outside and only bring little junior sister into the mausoleum, he reckoned that he would be beaten up when he turned around. This round fatty was still very good at observing people's expressions. Little junior sister's husband wasn't someone to be trifled with. Those few young masters around her didn't seem to be good people either. The arm couldn't win against the thigh, he better not seek his own death. Where is ancestor Tian Jizi's mausoleum? Everyone, please follow me. The round fatty took a few short steps and led the group forward. Arbor silently followed for a while and suddenly said expressionlessly, those mechanical puppets are all in the mausoleum. How did they run out? Tian Tuzi was stunned for a moment, then he grinned and said, little junior sister, you're talking about those mechanical puppets? Arbor glanced at him, and Pang Qiu instantly felt a chill creeping towards his neck. He hurriedly shrunk his neck and said with a chuckle, those mechanical puppets, their temperaments are more lively. When they have nothing to do, they like to come out for a stroll. This isn't the first time they've come out of the mausoleum. This time, they probably felt the aura of a patron coming. Oh right, they especially like to rob people. Everyone's mouth twitched. Impossible. Arbor retorted him expressionlessly. Since they were branded by her divine sense, naturally they should have the same temperament as her. Lively? What the hell was that, hee hee. How often do they usually come out to rob? Arbor asked in a deep voice. Must see. Pang Qiu was frightened by little junior sister's gloomy expression, and hurriedly confessed everything in one breath. Every time someone enters the mystic realm, little junior sister will plan and move out, leaving the mausoleum to rob. And Wushuang couldn't help but burst out laughing. Seeing her sister-in-law's gaze on her face, she pretended to raise her hand to cover her mouth, but the smile in her eyes could not be concealed. They built a secret little treasury. It's in the southeast of Master's mystic realm. Every few days, they would dig out the treasured weapons that Master had buried in the mausoleum and move them to their little treasury. Hang Chiu stole a glance at the expressionless junior sister and continued stuttering, I saw that a Master's mausoleum was really a little empty after being moved. So, I moved the spirit treasure artifact back. Mo Lien tried not to smile. Ahem, is that so? You're clearly babbling nonsense. Xiao Mu icily stated, am I that kind of person? Tian Tuzi cautiously glanced at his little junior sister and said in a trembling voice, perhaps, little junior sister doesn't know your true temperament. Tian Tuzi's voice quietly lowered when he suddenly saw the little girl's cold gaze. Pfft, young Master Ding couldn't help but laugh. He nodded and said, I think Brother Baldy's words are not without reason. Everyone glanced at him. Reason my ass. Chapter 44-74. Arbor took a step forward, his eyes brimming with vigor, and his small face was taut like a piece of iron. Every step he took left a deep footprint on the slope. It was as if he was ruthlessly stomping on the slope beneath his feet with Baldy's head. Tian Tuzi shuddered and pitifully followed her. He asked in a small voice, is little junior sister angry? Princess Wushuang was overjoyed, and she cracked a smile. What do you think? You must have been remembered by sister-in-law. Not only will sister-in-law remember you, but my eldest brother definitely won't let you off either. The princess took pleasure in Fatty Baldy's misfortune and threw him a look that said, good luck. Tian Tuzi only felt his entire body turn cold. When he turned his head, he saw Prince Mo staring at him icily. This guy instantly shuddered, and he hastily said honestly, junior brother-in-law, don't misunderstand. I didn't have any ill intentions when I built these golems, little junior sister. This pile of golems all had the appearance of 11 or 12-year-old children. They had small bodies and slightly large heads, and their facial features imitated little junior sister's appearance. Their small noses and small eyes were vivid and lifelike. However, it was only a 70-80% resemblance. It was still a distance away from little junior sister's current icy appearance. Mo Lien snorted. If you really harbored any ill intentions, would you still be standing here alive? The fat Baldy shuddered and felt a chill run down his spine. Subconsciously, he moved to the side of his junior sister to hide. Junior sister. Now that elder brother has confessed everything, can you forgive elder brother? The little stoic turned to look at him. I came here on ancestor Xuanji's last wish. Originally, as Tianji Zi's disciple, I would definitely beat you up when I saw you. Don't hit, little junior sister. I'm convinced, I'm truly convinced. Don't hit me. Fat Baldy cried out pitifully with a long face. The girl gave him a look that said, you're very smart. While she walked forward, she said without batting an eyelid, did you just say that the group of mechanical puppets made a small treasury? That's right. The fat Baldy pointed in the southeast direction, and an idea suddenly flashed in his mind. Little junior sister, do you want to take a look? It's not impossible, the little stoic replied stiffly. The corner of the fat Baldy's mouth twitched slightly. He immediately understood what the little ancestor meant. He nodded repeatedly and said, after we become master's disciples, I will take you to that little treasury for a stroll. Yes. It's not far ahead. The fat Baldy wiped his sweat and walked forward with his short, fat legs. Junior martial sister, look. It's just up ahead. Arbor looked in the direction Bald Fatty was pointing, and all he could see was a blur. It was as if he had reached the border of the secret territory. He couldn't see clearly with his naked eye. Everyone reflexively used their divine senses to explore that gray fog. They saw a mausoleum carved from white jade that was currently being repaired on a dozen or so flights of stairs. It was located at the center of the gray fog. What an amazing nine-labyrinth maze formation, Mo Lien murmured. Tian Tuzi immediately turned his head around, beaming with delight. Junior brother-in-law, you're quite knowledgeable about mechanisms and formations, right? Let's have an exchange later when we're free, all right? Mo Lien glanced at him and nodded slightly. Sure. Tian Tuzi immediately danced with joy. This guy had already forgotten the days and months in the Tianji secret realm. Chapter 4475. How could he not be happy when he finally found a kindred spirit who was well versed in formations and mechanisms? Everyone, follow me. Tian Tuzi turned his head and beckoned. Just as he was about to step into the gray fog, his expression suddenly froze. Not good. Someone has barged into the formation. Arbor raised his brow. With a slight movement of his finger, an attack talisman slid into the gray fog. It was like a clay ox entering the sea, never to return. There wasn't the slightest ripple. The joking expression on Tian Tuzi's face vanished. A hint of anger and murderous intent appeared on his chubby face. Who is so audacious as to attempt to barge into Master's mausoleum? Let's go in and take a look. Arbor urged with a frown. That delicate woman's face inexplicably appeared in his mind. An ordinary person without any cultivation leading a group of cultivators into the mystic realm? Why did he feel like he had seen this kind of person somewhere before? A spark of inspiration seemed to flash through the depths of the little stoic's mind, and her footsteps abruptly halted. Qiao qiao. Mo Lien also stopped in his tracks with a puzzled expression. Husband, I have an idea. Who exactly does that person resemble? Which person? That Miss Mu Xiaoxue. Arbor followed the fat baldy into the gray fog formation. As soon as everyone entered the formation and sensed the thick fog surging in from all directions, they saw Tian Tuzi suddenly jump forward. He threw out 17 to 18 pebbles in succession, and after a series of extremely fast strikes, he determined their location by listening to their sounds. The thick fog in front of them rolled away at an even faster speed than when it came, like a receding tide. The white jade stairs were right in front of them. It looked like it was only a few steps away, but they discovered that the scenery was completely different when they climbed up. The space here was very ingenious and seamless, making it impossible for people to see any disharmony. A lush forest appeared before everyone's eyes. There were fresh flowers and fruit trees on both sides, and there was a white jade stone path in the middle that led straight to the end of the mausoleum. Who are you? Such audacity, daring to directly enter the nine-palace mausoleum formation and break through a third of it. If he hadn't arrived swiftly, would these people really have wanted to barge into Master's mausoleum? I was too careless. I didn't expect that there would be an array master among the people who entered the secret realm this time. Xiao Mu pulled Mo Lien's hand in a few steps and dashed up the white jade steps, arriving before a wordless stele. The corners of his mouth suddenly rose slightly, as if he had seen something interesting. His eyes were fixed on a young girl standing in front of the monument. The young girl had a delicate appearance, and her watery eyes were clear. Looking at her, she was like a little flower that was not tainted by dust, gently swaying in the wind. It was as if the little stoic was staring at her prey, and a glint flickered in her watery eyes. So similar. They really look alike. She muttered in a low voice. Her eyes were frighteningly bright. Everyone glanced at her and felt that the little stoic's current expression was a bit strange. Mo Lien was even more worried. She shook his hand and said, Jojo. Take her down. Arbor suddenly flicked his wrist, and a slender, long, and smooth white snake swiftly slithered. It suddenly scuttled up and opened its huge mouth in the air. Its icy eyes stared fixedly at the girl who had turned pale with fright, and it abruptly bit her. A pitch-black figure abruptly blocked in front of the girl. He held a broad-mouthed black saber that flickered with a dazzling light. This saber was clearly not an ordinary item. Under the great void serpent's powerful bite, the saber merely bent slightly. Chapter 4476. Hiss. The snake's cold tongue slid away from the blade, and it opened its mouth again, biting at the old man's left shoulder with its sharp teeth. The old man in the black robe opened his hand and set up an arc-shaped defensive wall, protecting Mu Xiaoxue behind him. His eyebrows were completely knitted together, and he shouted, "How dare you!" Crack! The old man's eyes showed a trace of fear. He didn't expect that the defensive wall he set up with his own hands would have a crack the width of a finger after being bitten by the giant snake. He had never seen such a terrifying snake. No, there was definitely something wrong with this snake. It's a sacred beast. A calm voice came from behind. Get out of the way. Chi. The giant snake tilted its head, and a black smoke came out of its mouth. The golden crown on its head also tilted slightly with its movement. Be careful. A few blue talismans flew in front of the old man in the black robe. With one block, the blue talismans were immediately riddled with holes in the black smoke, and completely lost their function and fell to the ground. It's really easy to get all of these. Xiao Mu's frigid voice abruptly rang out, and with a light flick of her sleeve, several hundred talismans flew out and formed a large circle, trapping the black-robed elder and the others inside the talisman matrix. The old man in the black robe's face was incomparably cold and dark. He slapped his palm over and hit the confinement talisman array, but was immediately bounced back and took a step back. Elder Zhuang. Mu Xiaoxue's face was full of shock, and she hurriedly reached out to support the old man in the black robe. Arbor looked at them coldly through the confinement talisman array. His gaze swept across the faces of Mu Xiaoxue, Xiao Yi, Gu Yishuan, and the old man in the black robe. Finally, his gaze fell on the face of a pale-faced, gloomy-looking man in his late 20s to the right of Mu Xiaoxue. Grand Talisman Master. Arbor's mouth curved slightly. He leaped into the air and flew out of the confinement talisman array. Clusters of flames flickered in his eyes, and he stared coldly at the other party. If you can take 3 of my talismans, I'll spare your life. The first talisman jumped out, emitting a trace of purple light. Seeing this, Luo He's pupils constricted slightly as he looked at the little girl in front of him in disbelief. The girl looked to be about the same age as the young miss, but she took out a purple talisman at this moment. This jade talisman flew towards him, and a thick talisman power immediately enveloped his body. This feeling was puppet runes. Luo He's eyes darkened, and he couldn't help but tighten his body instinctively. He immediately threw out several dispelling talismans from his sleeves. However, but it was useless. The purple light of the puppet charm suddenly disappeared into his body. Mu Xiaoxue cried out in fear, "Brother Luo." Luo He's body trembled fiercely. Then, he hurriedly slapped a mind-cleansing talisman on his head. Several times in a row, the mind-clearing talisman was sent into his mind one by one to resolve the sudden puppet curse. Luo He was naturally very surprised. He was actually unable to avoid that puppet talisman. In fact, he couldn't even solve it within a few minutes. If he couldn't unravel the puppet talisman within a quarter of an hour, then unfortunately, he would really be controlled by the puppet talisman. Of course, he couldn't let this happen. Luo He's face was filled with fury. He raised his head to look in Arbor's direction, and a malicious, cold light flashed through his eyes. Since he couldn't unravel this puppet talisman for the time being, then he could only completely kill this stoic-faced little girl in front of him and use it to break this talisman spell. Chapter 4477. A cold glint flashed through this person's eyes. How could Arbor not see this clearly? Seeing that he was about to kill her, Arbor only curled her lips coldly, her eyes full of mockery. Little girl, you don't know that there's always someone better than you. Luo he sneered and suddenly flicked his fingers. Two talismans that also emitted a purple glow abruptly appeared in his hands. Arbor's eyes emitted a trace of mockery. She unhurriedly raised her hand and lightly patted herself. She then turned to wave her small hand at Emo Lien and Ma Shichen, who were frowning slightly. "Don't worry, watch the show." Prince Emo was a bit worried. After all, this great talisman caster in front of them didn't look weak in talisman power. However, the little stoic gestured at her to not worry and turned to hook her finger at Luo He. "Come." Life-seizing talismans look much more advanced than low-level mystic Yin talismans. Luo He's eyes turned, and a sneer surfaced on his lips. "What a conceited little girl. Then try this life-seizing talisman. Let's see if the defensive purple talisman on your body can defend against my—" Before he finished speaking, he had already flung out the life-seizing talisman in his hand. He had no intention of continuing to waste words with the little stoic. Two purple lights flew past, directly piercing through the air. Luo he sneered as he stared at Arbor, inwardly cursing, "Damn girl, do you think life-seizing talismans are so simple?" This was a double life-seizing talisman that he had carved out with great difficulty after many years of practice. Even if she had a defensive talisman on her body, it was impossible for her to come out unscathed. Luo he stared at Arbor's pitch-black eyes that were as deep as a lake. His gaze suddenly fell between her brows, and he saw a faintly discernible golden light before disappearing from his sight. Luo He's heart immediately skipped a beat. He inexplicably felt like his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Luo He only felt his heart beating like a drum. Thump, 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 thump. That sound was so loud that it almost ruptured his heart. No. No. Golden talisman. It was a sacred-grade golden talisman. The little stoic placed a sacred-grade golden talisman on her body just now. It wasn't a purple talisman, but a sacred-grade golden talisman. Furthermore, it didn't seem to be a pure defensive talisman. Double talisman. It was a double talisman. Yes, Luo He's heart skipped 18 beats as he couldn't help but roar out, "Protect, protect Xiao Shui." He hurriedly turned around and cast a talisman in Mu Xiaoshue's direction, his brows furrowed. Mu Xiaoshue was shocked. The black-robed old man beside her quickly shook his arm and erected a defensive barrier around Mu Xiaoshue. In the blink of an eye, the two purple talismans that Luo He had shot out earlier had already arrived in front of Arbor. Purple light overflowed and talisman power flowed. However, a strange sneer brushed past the little stoic's lips. The little girl did not get hurt as she had expected. She raised her dark eyes and looked at Mu Xiaoshue coldly. Puchi. Two soft sounds were heard. Mu Xiaoshue and Luo He both spat out a mouthful of blood. Little junior sister. Zhao Yi and Gu Yishuan were so shocked that their guts were about to burst. Zhao Yi even hugged his little junior sister and howled like he was wailing at a funeral. The little stoic's icy gaze swept over Mu Xiaoshue and Luo He. In the end, her gaze settled on Luo He, whose mouth was dripping with blood, and she mocked, "What deep devotion." Luo He held back a mouthful of blood and opened his mouth to speak, but he truly couldn't endure it. He immediately spat out another mouthful of blood with a "wah." Everyone's expressions changed drastically. Chapter 4478. Luo He, what's going on? Gu Yishuan supported Mu Xiaoshue's drooping hand and anxiously glanced at his little junior sister. Just a moment ago, after Mu Xiaoshue spat out a mouthful of blood, her face had turned deathly pale and she had fallen into a coma. Everyone was startled by this unforeseen event and hastily supported the little princess in a flurry. If anything happened to the little princess, they really wouldn't be able to account to the first city lord when they returned. Luo He's expression was also very unsightly. Because of his miscalculation, Miss Xiao Shui was injured instead. This made him feel somewhat embarrassed and disheveled. It's a substitute talisman. Luo he gnashed his teeth and cursed, she used a substitute talisman. He was careless and simply didn't see when the little stoic used that substitute talisman. A sacred grade gold substitute talisman. It could help the owner replace all of the attack power with 100%. This meant that the power of the two double life-reaping talismans he had previously used had all been directed at Miss Xiao Shui. If he hadn't reacted at the last minute and had Elder Zhuang set up a barrier to protect her, he would have been severely injured. In addition, he had used a rebound talisman on Miss Xiao Shui at the critical moment and absorbed most of the power into his body. If it weren't for this series of remedial actions, the current Miss Xiao Shui would probably be an ice-cold corpse instead of a heavily injured one. Luo He's eyes were bloodshot as he clenched his fists tightly and stared fixedly at the indifferent young lady in front of him. His fingers trembled as he coldly pointed at her and angrily shouted, "What a vicious and vicious girl." Luo He was so angry that he couldn't continue speaking. Gui Xuan anxiously urged, "What exactly happened? Luo He, why aren't you saying anything? What exactly happened just now?" This girl, used a substitute talisman just now and viciously transferred all of the attack power of the two life-reaping talismans to Miss Xiao Shui. What? Zhao Yi, Gui Xuan, and the other City of Shadows disciples clamored in anger. She's truly a vicious woman. Our little junior sister is only an ordinary person without the slightest bit of cultivation. You attacked an ordinary person, do you still have any dignity? How shameless. Mo Lien sneered with a cold face, everyone's meaning is that this crown prince's wife should obediently accept your life-stealing talisman and not resist. Third young Master Fu could not help but sneer. What kind of pig brain can say such a thing? Can you not be so disgusting? And Wushuang couldn't help but roll her eyes. She pointed at Luo He and said coldly, especially you. Why are you acting so pitiful? Master Talisman, you were the one who put the puppet talisman on the others, right? Why do you want to control those people? You can't deal with my sister-in-law now, so who can you blame? That's because you used too much talisman energy to control so many puppets. You. Luo He still wanted to say something, but a wave of qi and blood surged in his body, forcing him to shut his mouth and secretly adjust his breathing. Don't change the topic. Gui Xuan shouted angrily. Arbor, you're becoming more and more immoral. Say it yourself, you attacked an ordinary and weak girl who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. Are you worthy of being addressed as your excellency? You're unruly and willful, bullying the weak. Chapter 44-79. Bam! Gui Xuan inexplicably found himself flying backward and landing heavily on the ground. When he fell to the ground, he was still a bit dazed, not knowing what had happened. He didn't even see clearly who had attacked him. He didn't see clearly, but Luo He and the black-robed Elder Zhuang, saw everything very clearly. The black-robed man who attacked them was still grinning at them, as if he wasn't angry at all. However, the mockery and ridicule in his eyes were as sharp and frightening as a tangible saber light. You speak too much nonsense. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smoothed out the creases on his sleeves, still grinning. However, his words didn't seem so friendly. If you speak any more nonsense, this venerable one will take your lowly life. Only then did Gui Xuan see clearly that the young man who attacked him had outstanding looks and looked very young. However, the other person only waved his sleeves and directly sent him flying out of the group. Even if he flattered his horse for 18 years, he probably still wouldn't be able to catch up to this long-distance attack technique and force. Gu Yixuan felt a deep sense of despair. How could there be such a huge difference between people? Lin Zhinner hastily went up and said with an apologetic smile, Misunderstanding, it really was a misunderstanding. Sister. Lin Miao stomped her feet. When she saw her sister fawning over the little stoic, she wanted to vomit for no reason. Even if their group wasn't the little stoic's match, they couldn't admit defeat like this. Lin Miao ignored her and went up to Arbor and the others to cup her hands. Crown Princess, it's fate that we met. There's no need for us to fight if we can talk things over nicely, right? I know you didn't mean it, and you didn't deliberately target little junior sister. Arbor shook his head and interrupted her icily. You're wrong. I did mean it. Everyone, Zhao Yi was furious as he tightly hugged his unconscious little junior sister in his arms. He bellowed at Xiao Mu, you actually placed a substitute curse on a normal little girl. She's only 15 years old. She's still so young. Normally, she wouldn't even dare to step on an ant. Why are you treating her like this? Because, Arbor's dark eyes rolled and his gaze fell on the unconscious Mu Xiaoxue. I want her to suffer a fate worse than death. Everyone in the City of Shadows widened their eyes in horror and stared at Arbor as if they were looking at a sick person. Why did this happen? Why would Arbor treat their junior sister like this? What did little junior sister do to her? How could there be such a black-hearted, black-bellied woman in this world? How could she do such a vicious thing to such a pure and innocent junior sister? Why? Zhao Yi hugged his junior sister tightly. His chest shook as he shouted these words with grief and indignation. Arbor looked at him indifferently and said with a mocking tone, how can there be so many whys in this world? Do you need a reason to make a person's life unsmooth sailing and unsatisfactory? This group of people was too naive. Arbor's fingertips flashed, and a purple talisman appeared out of thin air in a few strokes. Drawing talismans in the air. Luo He's eyes widened, and his entire face contorted in horror. He really didn't expect that the woman he was going to deal with this time would be able to draw talismans in the air. Wait. Chapter 4480. There's still the third talisman. Arbor muttered to herself. A powerful aura seeped out of the talisman that had appeared out of thin air. Ghost Descent. Ghost Descent Talisman. Ghost Descent Talisman. Luo He's pupils abruptly contracted as he stared uncontrollably at the woman in front of him in shock. What struck them the most was that this stoic face wasn't drawing a Ghost Descent Talisman. She was continuously creating Ghost Descent Talisman after Ghost Descent Talisman. How were they supposed to withstand this? Not to mention the fact that Elder Zhuang had to focus on protecting Miss Xiao Shui because she was unconscious. He also had to continuously channel spirit energy into her to recover her body. Moreover, the average cultivation of these disciples in the City of Shadows was around the 10th level of the spirit realm. How were they supposed to withstand the powerful Ghost Descent Talisman? Run! Run! Luo He shouted harshly. The endless Ghost Descent Talisman that was being created was almost the last straw that broke his nerves. Even his teeth were chattering as he used an extremely terrified voice to warn everyone, run. Now. At the same time, a transportation talisman formation emitting a halo appeared beneath everyone's feet. However, the ghosts summoned by the little stoic were already coming out one after another. Ghastly wails and howls filled the area as dozens of ghosts bared their fangs and brandished their claws and rushed towards the talisman formation. They disappeared from everyone's sight along with the transportation talisman formation. Arbor's lips curled into a frigid sneer. Run then. No matter how they ran, these people could only stay in the Tianji secret realm. As long as the secret realm didn't spit them out, they couldn't leave at all. Jojo. Mo Lien moved to her side with a worried expression. She pulled her into her arms and patted her twice. Jojo, look at me. Xiao Mu looked up at him in confusion and asked with a blink, what is it? Jojo, you're not allowed to think about those unhappy pasts. I didn't. Arbor raised a small claw and raked it through his hair. What, you think I'm acting up again? No. Arbor raised his delicate eyebrows. My mind is clearer than ever. I know who she is. Who? She must be Mu Qingya's daughter. They're too similar. No wonder the more I look at them, the more I think they look alike. Arbor raised his little head and suddenly chuckled. Chen Kuei is indeed a fool. After all these years, he still hasn't seen Mu Qingya's true colors. She thought that Mu Qingya's youngest daughter really had a miscarriage. From the looks of it, isn't she living well in the City of Shadows? Upon hearing this, Mo Lien raised his eyebrows. You think that the City of Shadows Mu something shui? She's actually Mu Qingya's youngest daughter who had a miscarriage. Arbor nodded. Speaking of which, if she hadn't been chatting with Chen Qing that day and accidentally heard about Mu Qingya's second delivery, she really wouldn't have been able to connect the two women. So, it's very likely that the City of Shadows has long been in cahoots with Tianyun? Arbor nodded with a slightly gloomy expression. Very likely. Arbor blinked and held Mo Lien's hand. He whispered softly, Mu Qingya, that bitch, always wants to control the overall situation in other people's lives. She doesn't want me to have a good life. Should I reciprocate? Chapter 4481. Then I'd like to see what kind of interesting reaction she'll have if it's her own daughter who's being manipulated. Mo Lien's warm hand wrapped around hers. Jojo, Elder Zhuang beside her is a late-stage venerable immortal. Don't go up against him alone. Xiao Mu stroked the white snakelet that had returned to hibernating on her wrist and nodded. I know. He could withstand 3 fierce attacks from the little white snake, so he must be a transcendent immortal expert. Mu Qingya must have valued her daughter very much, otherwise she wouldn't have found a late-stage venerable immortal expert to protect her. Take a guess, husband. If she saw her daughter's fate being controlled by someone else and her body withering away, would she go crazy? Mo Lien sneered. She's such a cold woman, how could she worry about her children? Just look at her attitude towards Mu Rou and you should know. She's a heartless and selfish woman. She's different from your mother and all the normal mothers in the world. You can't use the standard of an ordinary mother to think of this woman, or you'll inevitably suffer. Arbor felt that the Crown Prince's analysis was very correct and quickly nodded. I know, then it's probably useless to torture Mu Xiaoxue. She won't feel sorry for her at all. The Crown Prince's eyes were cold as he held her in his arms and looked at the teleportation array in the distance where Mu Xiaoxue and the others had escaped. These people have a lot to do with the higher-ups of Tianyun. We'll get rid of them as soon as we see them. It's considered getting rid of evil for the people. Arbor nodded. He originally wanted to play with Mu Xiaoxue, but most of his thoughts were extinguished. Just those ghost spirits alone were enough to give their team a hard time. But Jojo, are you sure that Mu something is Mu Qingya's daughter? But speaking of which, Jojo's intuition was quite accurate every time. Arbor nodded and said firmly, they're two alike. Alike? Mo Lien was a little confused. In fact, the little princess of the City of Shadows really didn't look like Mu Qingya at all in terms of appearance. The resemblance Jojo was referring to was a kind of spiritual resemblance, Mo Lien thought. She held Jojo's hand and smiled faintly. She didn't ask any more questions. He just had to trust his Jo. Don't worry, little junior sister. Those people won't be able to escape the mystic realm, and they won't be able to run too far. The fat ball rolled over, and the anger on its face didn't lessen in the slightest. I observed carefully just now. There doesn't seem to be a master who specializes in formations in their group. I think they were hiding nearby and spying on us. When they saw that the situation was bad, they ran away first. Let's go into the main control room of Master's Mausoleum and see where they went. Watch me, I will definitely be able to help you capture all of them and vent your anger for you. The fat ball had no moral integrity at all. It confessed all of the big and small secrets in its master's mausoleum. Arbor found him more pleasing to the eye now. Previously, they had fought and kicked each other, so their grudges were settled. Since this person in front of him was the disciple of ancestor Tianjizi, then he would treat him as senior brother for the time being. Senior brother Fatty. Arbor's little face was stiff. Lead the way. Okay. The fat ball responded and immediately reacted. It beamed with joy and couldn't wait to jump up and dance. Little junior sister, what did you call me just now? Ha ha ha, did you hear that? Little junior sister called me senior brother. Chapter 4482. Huh, did you hear that, did you hear that? Everyone speechlessly looked at this idiot hopping around and poking people with his chubby fingers. The young masters gave him a cold look. Yet Princess Wuxia patted the fat ball's shoulder with great enthusiasm and lamented, "Don't forget to take a trip to the little treasury later." The fat ball nodded repeatedly, saying that he wouldn't forget. The group walked up the white jade stairs and arrived at the tombstone that didn't have a single word carved on it. The fat ball stepped forward with great familiarity and suddenly jumped around. He repeatedly struck the air with his palms. The air seemed to fluctuate rhythmically. Next to the blank tombstone, a small, floating door appeared out of thin air. "Come, everyone, come in." The fat ball was the first to step through the small door, and the rest naturally followed in a single file. A spacious tomb passageway appeared in front of them. The domed ceiling hung high, and huge luminous pearls hung in rows on the ceiling and all around them. They illuminated the surroundings. 2 rows of display cabinets were arranged in 2 rows. Yes, display cabinets. As if flaunting one's wealth, there was a lifelike golem standing on each display cabinet, or a divine weapon, concealed weapon, mechanism diagram, and so on. There were sabers, swords, and battle halberds. There was a dazzling array of concealed weapons of all shapes and forms. It was as if they had set up a stall, and there was practically no end in sight. Arbor suddenly took out a messenger talisman and used a gold-beaded talisman pen to draw a few lines on it. Then, he took out an image talisman and shone it everywhere. "Everyone, you're like a small vegetable farmer entering the city, shining everywhere, sending messages, and taking images. What are you doing?" Everyone's thoughts were as follows: did you forget that you can refine this mystic realm? Do you still need to shine here and there? You can totally refine it for your own use. Arbor expressionlessly put away the gold-beaded talisman pen and continued walking forward with a rigid expression. Communicating with Duanyu, Mo Lien asked exasperatedly. Upon hearing His Majesty's name, Rongqing immediately perked up her ears and walked closer. The little stoic, tell him that there are a lot of hidden weapons here to blind his dog eyes. Mo Lien felt more and more speechless. Don't you think this guy is a scammer? He clearly knows that others can't come, yet he still uses such a method to provoke others. The little stoic continued to utter an "N." "Do you miss him?" the crown prince asked jealously. The little stoic didn't continue with an "N" and only trotted forward with small steps. Just as Crown Prince Rong was about to speak, he heard the underworld province's crown prince say in a gruff voice, "What's there to think about? That guy might be trapped in the land of women and can't get out." Crown Prince Rong immediately retorted, "Nonsense. Your Majesty, please don't be too chaste." "Heh." Yas sneered. "I couldn't tell. With a body full of good looks, he was born a playboy." "Why aren't you reading Duanyu's reply?" Prince Mo, who was quickly following behind his wife, suddenly asked in a jealous tone. "How did you know?" Arbor was a bit curious. She had already put away the jade messenger talisman, so she didn't even know that Duanyu had replied. Wasn't it strange that the crown prince actually knew? Prince Mo chuckled, but his eyes revealed a dangerous aura. "Because this guy also sent me a message. Lien, my Qiao misses me, ha 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 ha." Was he asking for a beating? The little stoic silently took out her jade messenger talisman, and her eyes suddenly brightened. She was sleepy, sleepy, sleepy. Chapter 4483. Er Rong hastily chased after him and asked with a smile, "How is it, how is it? Did His Majesty say anything? Your monarch is coming." Arbor placed the jade talisman in front of Er Rong's eyes to let him admire it. Er Rong instantly looked like the sky was about to collapse, and he actually stuttered, how could this be? Didn't he already pacify that guy before leaving? He already told him not to rush over first and to wait at least half a year to stabilize the political situation before setting off on a long journey. What was Wu Yong doing? Why didn't he persuade him? Sir Jojo glanced at his expression and asked, "Is there some internal conflict in your Tsangzhou that needs to be resolved? It's not a big problem, but if it's not a big problem, why are you panicking?" The little stoic turned her small head and clenched her small fists. "Don't you know his character? Since he said he's coming, then the matter must have been resolved. So fast." Er Rong thought about it and felt that the little crown princess's words were extremely reasonable. He should believe in his monarch. Although the monarch was usually unreliable, he was more reliable than anyone when he was serious. They chatted and walked as they followed senior brother Fat Ball through a spacious tomb passageway and into a side anteroom. "Junior sister, look. There's a pile of sparkling crystal cores and ores in this anteroom. Your clones moved all of them to the little treasury earlier." Fat Ball turned around and said to her with a chuckle. This guy led them on a stroll. While showing them around the tomb, he also couldn't stop nagging and explaining things to them. Something like there were originally 2 peerless pearls on the murals, but little junior sister's clones dug them away. Something like there was originally a level 15 spirit beast crystal core embedded in the mermaid lantern, but little junior sister's clones dug it out. Along the way, he nagged non-stop. Everyone behind him had long been thunderstruck by him. Only the little stoic maintained her stoic face with all her might, not batting an eyelid. "Junior sister, here, here." Fat Ball led everyone into the main tomb chamber. All kinds of wickedly precious treasures hung on the stone walls around the tomb chamber, blinding everyone's eyes for a moment. "Junior sister, this place was originally emptied by you." At first, Fat Ball even used "your doppelgangers" as a substitute, but as it spoke, it became interested and directly used "you." "You have no idea how diligent you are in moving." He moved a little bit a day, every day. Later on, I saw that Master's side was too empty. I had no choice but to sneak into your little treasury and move some of these things back. Arbor, junior sister, are you particularly fond of these treasures? The Fat Ball opened its mouth with a simple and honest smile. Without waiting for Arbor to speak, Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen retorted in unison, "Nonsense." Arbor's mouth twitched. He coughed softly and said, "Let's pay respects to our ancestors first." He spoke a lot of nonsense along the way. Perhaps it was because he hadn't spoken to anyone for decades that he was extremely talkative. Oh. Fat Ball nodded with a chuckle and hastily led the little stoic to where the coffin was placed in the middle. Sir Jojo stopped in his tracks and raised his head slightly. He gazed at the pair of graceful jade statues in front of the coffin. They were made of white jade, a man and a woman, each with a long sword on their back. The statues were carved vividly and looked as if they were floating in the air. Chapter 4484. Incense shrines were set up in front of the 2 statues. "Master, Masteress, I've brought little junior sister to see you." Pang Chio walked forward, lit incense, and kowtowed before turning to beckon the little stoic. "Junior sister, quickly come and kowtow to Master and Masteress." Arbor stared fixedly at the 2 statues for a long time before sighing softly. Respectfully, he kowtowed 3 times in front of the 2 ancestors and completed his worship. "When did he pass away?" "It's been many years." Pang Chio scratched her head and pondered. "I also don't remember the time. Master was passionate about the study of mechanisms and concealed weapons his entire life. Before he died, he told me that he had dedicated his life and time to the study of concealed weapons and mechanisms, but he only neglected his wife. Oh, that's right. Hang Chiu walked to the incense burner and took out a letter to hand to Arbor. This is the letter Master wrote before he died. Junior sister, are you very familiar with Master's wife? Do you know where her bones are buried? Back then, Master sensed Masteress's passing and vomited blood on the spot. However, at that time, Master was already mentally and physically exhausted. His body was in poor health, and it was difficult for him to walk. Arbor lowered her head to take out the letter and read it. The handwriting was very messy, and the writer's strokes were erratic. Evidently, he didn't even have the strength to pick up the brush and write. The little stoic's face was taut as she carefully read the letter. She saw Tianjizi's letter. I painstakingly studied mechanisms and concealed weapons my entire life. My accomplishments in mechanisms are well known throughout the world. Emphasizing research but neglecting family ultimately resulted in an irreparable mistake. The letter was full of details, such as how she fell in love with Long Xuanji at first sight after meeting him, and how they spent their days together. After getting married, one of them was devoted to the mountains and rivers and liked to travel everywhere. The other stayed at home all day to do his academic research. Over time, they went from talking about everything to talking about nothing, becoming increasingly distant and indifferent. The final result was naturally Long Xuanji leaving in a fit of pique, and the husband and wife never saw each other again. Until one day, when Tianjizi realized that his wife might not be alive anymore, he suddenly realized something after Arbor finished reading it. He directly stuffed the letter into old Fat Ball's hand and scolded, "How boring." Everyone stared at her, dumbfounded. "He's already dead. Do you think it's useful to reminisce about the past? Little junior sister. This is child's play." The little stoic scolded without the slightest trace of politeness. The two of them aren't young anymore. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they got married and had children, and spent their days in harmony? Life can't just be about romance. Naturally, there are countless obstacles along the way. If you can't tolerate each other, then don't be together. What's the point of getting tired of each other? Little junior sister, surprise was written all over the Fat Ball's round face. Little junior sister. Don't worry. Before Senior Xuanji left, her resentment had already dissipated. Arbor glanced at her and said, "Like your master, she also set up a mystic realm. However, your master was slightly more lenient than her, and wasn't as swindling as her. Senior Xuanji swindled more than 20 generations of people. The mystic realm opened once every 10 years, and she used the Xuanji pill to bully those juniors, making them voluntarily hand over some spirit weapons and magic treasures. In the end, she even swindled me. She made me take over her Xuanji sect." Arbor said expressionlessly, "Since the two of them didn't get along when they were alive, then it's just the same after they died." Chapter 4485. There's no need to bury them together. Let's bury them separately. The little stoic made the final decision. Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. If Ancestor Tianjizi and Ancestor Xuanji were watching from the heavens and knew that this little troublemaker had insulted the two of them from head to toe without giving them any face, who knew if they would be so angry that they would jump up from the ground, press down on this stoic face, and give her a good beating. Junior sister. The Fat Ball called out aggrievedly. If junior sister has Masteress Xuanji's remains, please let them be buried together. The little stoic harumphed. They couldn't even love and care for each other when they were alive, so why should they be buried together and loathe each other after death? No, that won't happen. Master has already realized his mistake. He kept nagging about Masteress on his deathbed, saying that he had let her down. The Fat Ball looked pleadingly at Mo Lien, He Chen, and the others. Prince Mo strode forward and picked up his wife's small hand. "Jojo, they were stupid. Don't be angry. They didn't know how to cherish each other when they were alive and only realized some bullshit life principle when they were dying. Wasn't it laughable? It was simply a meaningless exchange of pointers. Yes, yes. Master has already realized that he was in the wrong. Little junior sister, don't be angry at him. How about you take a look at Master's place and outside? You can just take whatever you like. Senior brother will make the decision for you. The fat ball scratched its head and said sincerely, it's just that, Masteress, when can people be released from this mystic realm? You can leave on your own after half a month. The fat ball looked at her aggrievedly. Little junior sister, you don't want to see elder brother and want to leave right now? Arbor rolled his eyes at him. It felt a bit strange to be called elder brother by an old fat ball with this old senior brother's age. He could probably be a great-grandfather. Although this fat ball looked about 50 years old, he was probably about the same age as Qin Chi, Lu Zheng, and Hao Guang. Are you going out? The fat ball's eyes lit up. Junior sister, do you want me to go out with you? Immediately after, her eyes dimmed and she shook her head. No, I have to help Master guard this mystic realm. It's been like a day for several decades. Ever since ancestor Tianjizi passed away, you've never gone out. The little stoic's expression was solemn. The fat ball did not know how it had offended this little junior sister, but it nodded very honestly and weakly hummed in agreement. I think you're an idiot. Arbor couldn't help but roll his eyes. He had been living in this mystic realm alone for so many years. At most, Senior Mi Guang would occasionally come to disturb him. Speaking of which, the lives of these two old men were really miserable, lonely and pitiful. Senior brother Fatty, do you have any thoughts if I refine this secret realm? The fat ball was stunned. At first, it thought that it had misheard. Refine. Secret realm. Here. Arbor nodded. It's refined into this state. Arbor took out the realm of misfortune with a flip of his hand and showed it to the stupefied fat senior brother. What is this? The old man looked at Arbor in disbelief with excitement all over his face. He felt like his heart was about to jump out of his chest. This is a natural realm of misfortune on this deserted island. Ah, right, there is indeed a natural mystic realm here. Back then, when Master and I came here to explore, we even fell in. It took us nearly half a month to get out. Chapter 4486. Little junior sister, you mean, you can also refine our mystic realm like this? Tian Tuzi paced back and forth in front of the little girl. He was so excited that he wanted to jump up. This way, wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? After little junior sister put away the mystic realm, he wouldn't have to stay in this mystic realm all day to guard Master's mausoleum and also guard this mystic realm. That's great. The fat ball dashed to the little stoic and wished for nothing more than to shake her shoulders. Little junior sister, you can really do this? Won't this affect you? It'll take a long time to refine such a large mystic realm, right? Will there be any problems during the process? Will it cause you to suffer from chi deviation or something? Will it be dangerous? Will there be any accidents? The old fat ball's series of questions caught everyone off guard and made them dizzy. It was only after this Tian Tuzi finished asking that he discovered his adorable little junior sister was staring fixedly at him with a rare gentleness in her eyes. Senior brother fat ball blinked. Junior sister. Don't worry, senior brother Baldy. The venerable peach blossom immortal patted Tian Tuzi's shoulder and said with a chuckle, there won't be any problems for our Jojo to refine this mystic realm. They could even obtain a lot of energy from it and benefit a lot. Mo Yen also nodded with a smile. It's indeed a common occurrence for Jojo. There's no need to worry. Then junior sister, what are we waiting for? Tian Tuzi was so excited that he completely blocked out Xingjichen's senior brother Baldy. He rubbed his large, fat hands and nodded with a radiant smile. This way, I can go out with little junior sister. It's really, really great. He thought that he could only stay here with Master for the rest of his life. He didn't expect that he could go out and see the outside world while he was still alive. He was truly a bit excited. That is, after refining it, everyone in the secret realm will fall out. Xiao Mu knitted her brows. Before that, it was best to find Mu Xiaoxue and the others and deal with them first. The fat, bald senior brother slapped his thigh. Junior sister, you're looking for the girl who fainted, right? Come, follow me. Tian Tuzi turned around and led everyone into another side chamber next to the tomb. As soon as they walked in, they realized that the walls and ceiling of the room were all made of special crystal screens. The 4 crystal walls allow you to see the north, south, east, and west. You can see the movements of everyone in the secret realm. As soon as Tian Tuzi waved his hand, the crystal screen in front of everyone blurred for a moment before dispersing into wisps of light and shadow. 2 middle-aged men appeared on the screen, their eyes wide open and looking around vigilantly. Huifeng mining classmates' line cut, the speed of the spirit horse was extremely fast, and they would arrive at the imperial capital of the Tsang prefecture, the Phoenix the Arch City, within a few days. Do you know why His Majesty is so happy? Xiao Yi asked in a low voice while riding his horse. Ying, who was riding side by side, didn't have any extra expression on her cold face. She neither answered nor said anything. She completely treated Xiao Yi, who was beside her, as heir. Xiao Yi glanced at her and was about to urge her horse forward when Ying's cold voice unexpectedly sounded. I advise you not to disturb him. Didn't you see that His Majesty was absent-minded? How could he be happy? Phoenix the Arch City was right in front of them. His Majesty must be hesitating and considering how to deal with the second prince and the third prince. The state's affairs were too troublesome. Chapter 4487. His Majesty, whom Shadow had conjectured to be troubled by state affairs, was currently laughing foolishly in daydreaming. What a joke! Mo Lien, that fool, would definitely be fuming with rage when she saw his message, ha 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 ha. Anger him to death, anger him to death. Who asked him to shamelessly snatch Jojo? Humph. His Qiao Chuan had just messaged him, saying that they discovered an excellent mystic realm. It was old man Tianjizi's residence. There were concealed weapons everywhere in the mystic realm, and they were of all shapes and sizes. They were a dazzling array that would definitely suit his tastes. If there was a chance, how could he not pay a visit to a great master of concealed weapons like Tianjizi? Xiao Yi still couldn't resist and coughed lightly on his horse. He called out quietly, Your Majesty. Where did His Majesty look like he was worried about state affairs? He was clearly laughing foolishly by himself, all right. That Shadow not only had a foul expression, but even his gaze wasn't very good. His Majesty's happy expression actually turned into deep worry in his eyes. It was truly baffling. Duan Yu returned to his senses and absent-mindedly glanced at Xiao Yi. I heard that you got along quite well with Wu Yi recently. Who did you hear that from? Xiao Yi was speechless. He glanced at his monarch and shook his head. There's no such thing. Duan Yu patted his shoulder. No need to be embarrassed. We already heard them talk about it. Xiao Yi, what was with this inexplicable ominous premonition? I heard that when you pretended to be a boy toy in front of Wu Yi, you did that and that with him. Duan Yu looked at him calmly and nodded. Don't worry, we are an open-minded monarch. We normally won't trouble you guys too much, and we definitely won't get in your way. Xiao Yi's eyes widened. What was that? Your Majesty, explain it to me face to face. Speaking of which, we're about to reach the capital soon. Do you miss him a lot? Previously, Wu Yi sent Miss Wu back to the city first. It was we who didn't think things through and should have let you return with Wu Yi. No, your majesty. Xiaoyi only felt like there was a lump of air stuck in his throat. He really wanted to spit at this young monarch's face. What do you mean? What do you mean? Who wants that dead face? Duan Yu glanced at his beautiful subordinate and lamented regretfully, we originally wanted to bestow you a few beauties as compensation, but it seems that it's not appropriate now. I didn't expect that you would actually make the act real. I'm very open-minded, so don't worry. I won't stand in your way. Duan Yu blinked and threw down these words. He saw that his subordinate's complexion was alternating between green and red, as if he wasn't happy. He asked curiously, what's wrong with you? Your Majesty, this subordinate wants to know who is so gossipy in front of you. Xiao Yi gritted his teeth and asked almost word by word. Your leader, Yi. Duan Yu realized in hindsight and asked with a light cough, could it be there's more to it than meets the eye? If Wu Yi didn't pretend to be Rongli and you pretended to be his pet, then the two of you, before Duan Yu could finish speaking, he saw Xiao Yi turn his horse around and gallop towards Ying. What's wrong with him? Duan Yu was speechless. Xiao Kezi said in a trembling voice, I feel like I'm going to kill someone, Your Majesty. Duan Yu pondered for a moment. That's why I said, don't spout nonsense normally. Yi, this person, seriously, how could he fabricate nonsense out of nothing? Your Majesty, the Duke of East Mountain's entourage has come to welcome you. Okay. Duan Yu nodded and urged his horse forward. Have the Duke of East Mountain come over. We have something to say to him. Chapter 4488. Outside Phoenix Emperor City, the Duke of East Mountain, Wu Heng, had been waiting respectfully for a long time with tens of thousands of troops. When he heard that His Majesty summoned him, he naturally dismounted and hurried forward. Duan Yu held the horsewhip in one hand and turned his head slightly to glance at the young man behind him. The Duke of East Mountain, Wu Heng, whom we rely heavily on. This is the 8th young master of the talisman patrician family, Qi Rui. Everyone says that the 8th young master of the Qi family is almost demonic in his wisdom. Your Majesty is too kind. Your Majesty is too kind. The 8th young master of the Qi family and the Duke of East Mountain, Wu Heng, cupped their hands in salute and bluntly said that His Majesty was too kind. Duan Yu glanced amiably at the Duke of East Mountain. How are things? Your Majesty, the second prince and more than 700 of his henchmen were all arrested and imprisoned in Lulan Resort. There's really no news from Old Third. The Duke of East Mountain shook his head. How troublesome. Duan Yu massaged his temples. We are a bit tired from the bumpy journey. We will leave the interrogation to you and Little Eighth. Yes. Qi Rui and Wu Heng bowed. What has Old Third been doing recently? Still eating, drinking, and playing around. Duan Yu spurred his horse and left, leaving behind only a faint echo of his voice. Your Majesty, the third prince has been very well behaved recently. He barely leaves his residence and only invites some reputable scholars to feasts and discuss poetry and painting. There's nothing out of the ordinary. Pfft, Duan Yu chuckled mockingly. He wants to play the pig to eat the tiger. We will completely turn him into a pig. Little Kezi, oh no, he kept feeling that His Majesty had become very temperamental recently. The Duke of East Mountain turned and cupped his hands at the 8th young master of the Qi family. 8th young master, please help us with the interrogation. It's my duty. Qi Rui nodded with a smile. Please lead the way, Duke of East Mountain. Okay. The Duke of East Mountain gestured. The journey is a bit long, so let's discuss it on the way. This prince also has some matters to consult the 8th young master. You are too polite, Duke of East Mountain. The two of them mounted their horses and led the large group of people towards the Lulan courtyard. That night, Duan Yu summoned Prince Rui, Prince Li of the first rank, and Prince Lu. When my father was still alive, He often said that my uncle and my two granduncles were people that I could trust. Right now, we have a very troublesome matter that requires the three of you to make a decision. I'm sure the three of you have heard about what happened to Second Imperial Brother. Second Royal Brother sent 700 disciples to bury more than 300 heaven-piercing thunders on the 12 main roads that crisscrossed Sovereign Capital for 3 consecutive nights. It's said that this firearm was created by the Thousand Secrets Pavilion. I've heard that the master of the Thousand Secrets Pavilion is the power behind the second prince, one of the 3 great families of the Tsang province, the Ho clan. The expressions of Prince Roy and the others changed as they cursed. Ridiculous. The three of you, it's not that I don't want to spare second brother's life, but his actions this time have angered both man and God, and the heavens cannot tolerate it. If it weren't for left Prime Minister Wu Yong and the Duke of East Mountain, Wu Heng, discovering that something was amiss and secretly sending people to investigate and capture those 700 disciples overnight, right now I'm afraid the entire Phoenix Emperor City would have been engulfed in a sea of fire. Millions of citizens would have lost their lives in this sea of fire. How many families would have lost their homes, and how many houses would have been burned to the ground? The hot-tempered Prince Lu slapped the small table in front of him. Preposterous. This child is simply deranged. If we don't punish him, how can the citizens be angered? Chapter 4489. Prince Li of the first rank and Prince Roy nodded gravely and said in unison, if this matter is verified to be true, this prince will absolutely not tolerate it. Duan Yu raised his hand in salute and said faintly, on behalf of the entire city's citizens, we thank the 2 granduncles for their righteousness. A bolt of lightning split the pitch-black night. Giddy up. On the official road, a small team of about a dozen people was braving the howling winds and torrential rain to protect 2 carriages as they sped away. From time to time, the sound of weeping could be heard from inside the carriage, incessantly irritating. Don't cry. Outside the carriage, a young man viciously scolded, what's the use of crying at this point? Silang, why are you so fierce? Your sister is also scared. A woman's choked voice came from inside the carriage. Scared? What's the use of being scared? I already told you guys not to do this. You said it was absolutely foolproof and would definitely succeed in one fell swoop. Ha, ha ha. In the end, going to Luyu Pass was merely a smokescreen, waiting for you guys to dig a hole and jump in. How could he have such a stupid group of clansmen? If he wasn't implicated by them, why would he need to flee the city in the middle of the night? Now that His Majesty has returned with his men, I think we won't have long to live. You shut up. Another young man with a slightly calmer face scolded angrily, what's the use of you yelling now? If you have the time to spout nonsense, you might as well conserve your strength and quietly wait for the right opportunity. The Ho family is finished. Finished. Ho Silang roared at the top of his lungs. Even though the rainwater drenched him from head to toe, it still couldn't relax his taut emotions in the slightest. In the stuffy air, a trace of despair gradually spread. Family head Ho shouted coldly, you all don't want to live anymore. You're still biting each other like dogs at this time. Continue on our way. Boom. A bolt of lightning struck the silent night, immediately illuminating everyone's ghastly pale faces. Look over there. Ma, Patriarch, someone called out in a trembling voice, and his finger trembled as he pointed over. On the hillside in front of them, a group of armored knights blended in with the darkness of the night. Whether it was the wind or the rain, no one knew how long they had been standing there. Tiger Cavalry, it's the legendary Tiger Cavalry. Ho Silang's eyes widened in horror and he couldn't help but scream. Prepare for battle. The Ho family's patriarch roared and raised one of his arms high, but it was hit by a heavy arrow. Caught off guard, the elderly head flipped off his horse and landed on the ground with a plop. In accordance with His Majesty the Emperor's verbal order, the Ho family conspired to create the heavenly thunder and colluded with the second prince to rebel. All of you are now being detained and awaiting trial. If there is any resistance, you will be killed on the spot. The neighing of the horses was intertwined with the sound of wind and rain. In just a moment, the sounds of fighting and crying could be heard. The next day, have you heard? The second prince's mansion and the whole family were both raided. What's the matter? The higher-ups are keeping it a secret. I heard it's a big deal. The second prince's mansion was raided, how can it not be a big deal? A few days ago, I heard that the second prince and the third prince were about to be conferred the title of king and sent out. Why is it so sudden? Move, move, move. Unrelated people, move to the sides. Don't interfere with the tiger cavalry's work. The person in the lead rode a tall black horse and held a long spear that flickered with a cold light. Chapter 4490. Behind them were 2 rows of soldiers who entered the city on horseback. Every soldier was wearing a half-masked tiger mask. When the sun shone on their faces, the pitch-black mask reflected a chilling light, looking a bit frightening. A child cried out in fright, but his grandparents quickly covered his mouth and dragged him to the back of the crowd. In the middle of the tiger cavalry, there was a large group of people tied up like grasshoppers. All of them were pale, their gazes darted around, and their bodies were filthy. It was unknown if they had rolled around in a muddy pond. It's the Ho family. Quickly look. Family head Ho's head. Someone shouted in fright. The common people on both sides of the river hurriedly closed their eyes in fright. They saw family head Ho's head being held on the tip of a spear by a soldier, and his head was hung up like this the entire way. Everyone's palms were sweating from fright, and they involuntarily retreated a few steps. Young Miss Ho stumbled as she followed behind the procession. She and her mother supported each other and cried as they walked. Their appearance was truly miserable. The large family of several dozen people was escorted to Lulan Manor and locked up separately from the second prince's estate. Presumably, everyone was well aware of what awaited them. There were witnesses and evidence in this matter, so there was no way to deny it. The heavenly lightning was created by the Ho family's Thousand Secrets Pavilion. The second prince's 700 disciples were all scared into confessing. The interrogation results were conveyed to the entire imperial capital in the afternoon. It was concluded that the second prince colluded with the Marquis's estate and conspired to rebel. His methods were especially vicious and cruel, actually attacking the entire city's common people. His motive was self-evident. Once the entire imperial capital was thrown into chaos, the second prince would be able to make a move. Unfortunately, he was killed by Duan Yu the moment he made his first move. This was his lamentable fate. Taking a gamble, wealth, glory, and splendor were right in front of him. However, he lost, so he naturally suffered a crushing defeat and lost everything. Duan Yu's order to exterminate the entire clan arrived before nightfall. Duan Yu set down his brush and stood in front of the window for a long time. The moon rose and the sun set. Night was about to fall again. The air was heavy. It seemed like it would rain again tonight. Princess, princess, you can't go in. Princess. Princess. Xiao Kezi was arguing with someone outside the corridor. A shrill female voice overpowered Xiao Ku's. Get out of the way. This princess told you to get out of the way. Dog slave, don't you understand? Princess Rong Shanshan of Jiankong rudely kicked Xiao Kezi aside and barged in. Imperial brother, I won't marry, I won't marry. What is it? Duan Yu's expression darkened as he coldly gazed at this unruly and willful princess. How dare you? Lil Ku Zi scrambled into the room. He adjusted the hat on his head and shouted angrily, someone come here. Princess Jiankong gritted her teeth and suddenly knelt down in front of Duan Yu with a plop. Royal brother, please spare me. I was young and ignorant in the past. I didn't mean to offend you. Imperial brother, imperial brother, for the sake of us being siblings, please forgive us. Don't send me to the barbarian tribe, I won't marry that Prince Dua. No, I won't marry him. Duan Yu coldly looked at her. You think we are forcing you to return the favor? Am I that bored? Your marriage was decided by the Board of Rights. We did not meddle in it. Also, it is Prince Dua of the barbarian tribe who has come to ask for your hand in marriage. Princess Jiankong's face was ghastly pale and worried as she repeatedly shook her head. Chapter 4491. No, that's not it, royal brother, royal brother. Princess Jiankong crawled several steps forward and threw herself in front of Duan Yu, sobbing uncontrollably, royal brother, withdraw the decree, royal brother. The imperial edict has already been issued, so how can it be trifled with? Duan Yu flatly refused, his eyes brimming with ruthlessness. Then I want to see royal mother. Princess Jiankong abruptly crawled up from the ground and shouted harshly with a contorted expression. Duan Yu even curled his lips mockingly. These days, your mother has been abstinent of desires, abstaining from meat, and reciting Buddhist scriptures for your deceased brother. If you want to go, just go. There's no need to inform us. Someone, escort Jiankong out. Princess Jiankong was rudely dragged out by 2 guards and directly thrown out the door. Duan Yu coldly called out. A black figure instantly appeared behind him. Master. Keep an eye on that person. Yes. Immediately nodded in understanding and turned to leave to carry out the order. Duan Yu's pitch-black eyes stared coldly outside the window for a long time, and he subconsciously rubbed his interspatial ring. Jiankong rushed out of Taiji Palace, only to discover that the rain outside was gradually increasing in intensity. Ever since the blood vessels in her left leg had permanently necrotized, she had to raise her left shoe when she walked, so her walking posture was very stiff. But even though it was raised, it was still bumpy when she walked, and one could see that she was limping when she walked fast. Jiankong staggered to Royal Mother's Renchuan Palace, but she was stopped by the palace servants waiting outside. Impudent. Princess Jiankong angrily tightened her grip on the silk handkerchief in her hand. Ever since eldest brother passed away, mother had never summoned her alone. At this time, Jiankong was completely grasping at straws. She was too terrified, so she simply didn't think much about why mother would suddenly treat her coldly. Royal mother. Royal mother. Jiankong wailed mournfully, her every word like a cuckoo's sobbing. Royal mother. Royal mother. Why don't you see a Ken? Jiankong. I am Jiankong, your daughter. Princess Jiankong knelt at the entrance of Renchuan Palace and shouted in the pouring rain. Royal mother. Let me see Jiankong. Mother, royal mother. Who's making so much noise outside? Wang Shi had already gone to bed. When she heard the commotion outside the palace, she couldn't help but frown and sit up. A palace maid stepped forward to light the lamp and draped a thin coat over her. An obedient old mama stepped forward a few steps, lowered her head and said in a low voice, "It's Princess Jiankong. The princess wants to see the Empress Dowager." Humph. A faint sneer appeared on the fake Empress Dowager's face. It's the middle of the night. Even if I don't rest, the other palace servants need to rest. What a silly child. What's the matter? Can't you talk about it tomorrow? Wang Shi's expression was indifferent. She raised her hand to fix her messy hair. Go and send her away. Yes. The old nanny bowed, turned around, picked up an oil paper umbrella, and hurried away. Wang Shi watched as the old nanny left and calmed herself down. Then, she quickly walked to the window and opened it. As expected, a black shadow suddenly appeared at the window. Lord Ying. Wang Shi hurriedly bowed. What instructions does your majesty have for me? His majesty told you to deal with it yourself. Don't alarm too many people. Yes, this concubine understands. Wang Shi smiled and nodded repeatedly. Princess, the Empress Dowager has already gone to bed. If you have any business, come back tomorrow. Chapter 4492. Where's Mi Heng? Where did Imperial Mother's senior royal maid, Mi Heng, go? Who are you? Why haven't I seen you before? That elderly nanny was unsmiling. This old servant was recently promoted by Her Majesty the Queen Dowager. As for that Aunt Mi you mentioned, she should have been transferred to another place. This old servant is also not clear about the specifics. Princess Jiankong was drenched from head to toe by the torrential rain, and her eyes were also soaked by the rain, making it difficult for her to open them. Her only conviction supported her as she tightly grabbed that elderly nanny's arm and cried, "I just want to see Imperial Mother once, can't I even see her once? I know Imperial Mother definitely has a way. Imperial Mother definitely won't let me marry that barbarian. I want to see Imperial Mother, I want to see." The elderly nanny heavily swatted away Princess Jiankong's drenched hand and said coldly with knitted brows, "Princess, this old servant has already delivered the message. It's up to you whether you want to go or not. This old servant will withdraw first. Come back, come back. If she makes any more noise, gag her mouth and throw her out. Yes. You dare. You dare to treat me like this. Imperial Mother. Imperial Mother. I want to see Imperial Mother, Imperial Mother MMPH, MMPH. Imperial MMPH so noisy." Wang Nei ordered people to close the doors and windows in disgust and no longer paid attention to Princess Jiankong, who was being dragged away. She laid on the bed and maliciously thought, "Empress Lu, Empress Lu, you probably never expected that your daughter would actually be sent to the barbarian gang for a political marriage. Even more so, you never expected that Princess Jiankong, who was clearly the daughter of the royal family, would one day fall into such a state of isolation and helplessness in the palace." She thought of Princess Jiankong, who had to suffer the wind and rain outside, and then thought of the 8 people in her family who died in vain. She tightly clutched her lapel and spat out each word viciously, "Far from enough. We plan to make a trip to the River of Forgetfulness in a few days," Duan Yu said indifferently inside the royal study. "During our absence, we will temporarily leave state affairs to Uncle, the Prince of Lu, to supervise. Beloved official Wu, Prince of East Mountain, you too will assist him well." "Your Majesty." The dumbfounded uncle hastily looked up and said, "Although the second prince's matter is almost resolved, there are still many things." Duan Yu was expressionless. "Furthermore, your Majesty has only ascended the throne for a few days, and you want to leave the imperial city? That's not right." Duan Yu turned his peach blossom eyes and coolly glanced at the Duke of Lu, shoving back the latter's you mustn't, suggestion. "It won't take long." Duan Yu replied indifferently, 10 days is enough for a round trip. "Your Majesty, please reconsider." In the imperial study, a group of old officials who had been summoned cried out pitifully. "Think thrice." She had already thought about it over and over again. "There's no need to panic. The main purpose of this trip is to see how our battle team against the heavenly fate is doing." Duan Yu raised his hand to interrupt the official's words and said aloofly, "Reportedly, the River of Forgetfulness discovered a rare mystic realm treasure land. Ah Qing has a good temper. I'm worried that he won't be able to win against the other two." When the chubby Prince Qing heard that it was related to his child, he immediately nodded and said, That's right. Our Ah Qing's temperament is the best. If she were to be duped by the 2 crown princes of the Divine Prefecture's Underworld province, she might end up being tricked. That's right. Duan Yu nodded repeatedly and gave the Prince Qing an approving look. Sure enough, this Uncle Prince Qing was one of their own. He understood the meaning of the song and immediately went along with it. Good. Chapter 4493. We plan to go over and take a look. We will also bring along our Phoenix Emperor City's young talents and patrician family elites. Duan Yu patiently guided the courtiers in front of him. Dear courtiers, if there are any talents who wish to go together, you can quickly sign up. The old courtiers quickly looked up and asked in confusion, the River of Forgetfulness Mystic Realm? Is it really that rare? Rare, rare. We received news that the Mystic Realm is littered with all kinds of divine weapons and magic treasures. We can casually pick one up and use it as a divine artifact to guard our residence. Ha, he was just teasing you. These must have already been taken by his Charles. Mystic Realm, what Mystic Realm? That was his Charles. You believed him just because he said it was a mystic realm. No wonder you can only be our courtiers. In terms of intelligence and wisdom, none of you can compare to our resourceful us. The old courtier's eyes brightened. Your Majesty, if it's really that rare, then we can indeed make a trip. After all, everyone knew the character of those two from the Divine Province and the Underworld Province. They weren't good people. Vassal Prince Rome was a cultured, refined, and modest gentleman. Perhaps those two would join hands to deal with him. It would be different if His Majesty went. His Majesty wasn't a good person either. He would definitely be able to obtain a portion of the resources from those two. Nowadays, the world was difficult, and resources were hard to come by. Since they discovered such a rare mystic realm, then they naturally couldn't let the people of Zhangzhou return empty-handed. Everyone looked at each other. All right, don't waste your breath. The Prince of Qin immediately made a decision. Hurry home and find several young talents to accompany His Majesty to the River of Forgetfulness. Don't you trust His Majesty's character? Since His Majesty said he would return within 10 days, then he will naturally return within 10 days. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Prime Minister Wu couldn't help twitching his mouth. Why did he feel so untrustworthy? The old courtiers grumbled a few more times before following Prime Minister Wu out in a dawdling manner. Duan Yu instantly felt mentally tired. He sat down and drank a mouthful of cold tea before jumping up. Go, tell them to submit the name list tonight and set off tomorrow. He didn't want to wait a moment longer. Prime Minister, do you think His Majesty is reliable? An old official who was on good terms with the Prime Minister could not help but quietly ask this question. The corner of Prime Minister Wu's mouth twitched slightly. Actually, he also felt that His Majesty was not very reliable, but if he was really reliable, he was really not someone ordinary people could compare to. In order to comfort his colleague, Prime Minister Wu repeatedly nodded against his will. Reliable, very reliable. At this time, a guard hurriedly came out and stood on the steps to announce what His Majesty had just said. Everyone was speechless when they heard that. 3 minutes ago, in the imperial study, His Majesty was still looking at them and gently said, "My beloved subjects, we plan to depart for the River of Forgetfulness in a few days." In the blink of an eye, the departure from a few days later had become tomorrow. Did he have to change so quickly? You're the great emperor of the Tsang Prefecture. Is it really okay to change your mind? When Lord Wuyong saw his old colleague's doubtful gaze, he was instantly rendered speechless. Lord Wu, do you think that His Majesty might be? That official surreptitiously glanced around before inching closer to Wuyong and whispering mysteriously, bluffing us? Wuyong really wanted to tell this colleague, it's extremely possible, old buddy. But for His Majesty's sake, Prime Minister Wu still shook his head resolutely. No. Chapter 4494. At the end of the flower garden, the flying eaves of the pavilion were buried under layers of pavilions. The golden-red setting sun lazily shone on a corner of the pavilion, reflecting on the pale face of a young girl in the pavilion. Is he here? Have you prepared everything? Princess, can we not do this? The little palace maid pinched the corner of her clothes, and her voice was so panicked that she was about to cry. I only have this last chance to fight for my life. If he doesn't want to be accused of forcing his own sister to death right after ascending the throne, he should withdraw the order. Princess Jiankong clenched her pale fist and shouted harshly. She would never marry that stinky barbarian tribe man. That Prince Yuhua, she had seen him from afar. He looked rough and talked like a broken gong. From beginning to end, there was nothing that could satisfy her. He was a barbarian through and through. Why did he come to Cangzhou to ask for her hand in marriage? She was Princess Jiankong, the beautiful and charming princess. How could she follow that barbarian and go to his whatever tribe? Princess. The little palace maid nervously pinched the corner of her clothes and rubbed it hard. His Majesty has already issued the imperial edict, so he definitely won't withdraw it. Princess, please don't do this. If you do this, this servant will be implicated and die. Now, in the palace, who doesn't know that His Majesty is not to be trifled with? Princess Jiankong was simply playing with fire. If she really angered His Majesty the Emperor, everything would be irreparable. I don't care. Princess Jiankong shouted coldly. She reached out and pinched the little palace maid's arm. She stared at her with a gloomy gaze and pressed on step by step, repeatedly shouting, "Is it now that even you won't listen to me? Even you want to betray me? Do you really want to go and spread the news, saying that I'm faking my death here, saying that ha ha ha." A light laugh suddenly interrupted Princess Jiankong's chattering curses. Princess Jiankong suddenly turned her head. A pair of red eyes stared unwaveringly at the young girl who walked in with light and soft steps. "Hey, isn't this my good sister, Princess Jiankong? I haven't seen you for a few days and you've made yourself look so pathetic." Rong Yuhu took a few steps forward with a grin and reached out to pick up a strand of Princess Jiankong's hair, clicking his tongue. "Seventh elder sister, what's wrong with you? How did you lose so much weight? If the Empress Dowager saw you, she would be very distressed." "Rong Yuhu, what are you trying to do?" Princess Jiankong abruptly pushed her hand away and said in a threatening manner, "What? Do you think that this princess is in dire straits now that even you, a lowly palace maid's lowly child, can rush forward and step on this princess? This princess is telling you, no matter how destitute I am still Empress Lu's child. I am the son of the main wife, and you. He was just the son of a lowly servant. What do you have to compete with me?" "Ah!" As soon as Rong Shanshan finished speaking, she was slapped hard on the face. "Princess!" the little palace maid behind her exclaimed. Rong Shanshan's eyes were almost on fire and filled with blood. She turned her head inch by inch and coldly stared at the woman with the corners of her mouth slightly raised. She raised one hand high, but before she could slap it back, it was caught by Rong Yuhu. "Rong Shanshan, do you think that you're still the high and mighty Princess Jiankong?" Rong Yuhu put her left hand behind her back. "You want to make a move on me with your little skills?" Chapter 4495. Usually, I give in to you and tolerate your bad temper because of your mother. Do you think that with that pig brain of yours and your trashy skills, I would willingly stay by your side and let you beat and scold me? Do you think that I would be willing to come and go at your beck and call? You and I are both princesses. What do you have to be noble about? Do you know how disgusting you are? Showing your stupid face everywhere and offending people everywhere. You even want me to clean up the mess for you. I have long had enough of you." "Ah!" Princess Jiankong only felt a sharp pain coming from the arm she was holding. It was as if her arm was about to be pulled off by her. It was so painful that cold sweat dripped down her forehead. "Princess, princess!" The little palace maid was anxious and angry. She repeatedly shouted, ninth princess, don't be like this. Ninth princess, let go of our family's princess, ninth princess. Rong Yuhu, you slut. You and your slut mother are the same ah. Princess Jiankong only felt a crisp cracking sound coming from her arm. Her arm was actually torn apart by that bitch Rong Yuhu just like that. Slut. You keep saying that other people are sluts. Why don't you look in the mirror? Who looks more slutty now? Who is the slut? Rong Yuhu pushed her to the fan-shaped seat at the side of the pavilion and ruthlessly pressed her there, allowing Rong Shanshan to look at her battered and exhausted self on the water surface. Just because you were born of the Empress, since you were young, you relied on your identity to bully and humiliate others everywhere. Have you ever thought that there would be a day when you would lose your power and influence like today? That you would live like a dog like now? Ah. Princess Jinkong's head was pressed down by her 5 fingers. She had no choice but to lean over and look at her reflection on the water surface. I guess you still don't understand how you ended up in such a miserable state, right? Rong Yuhu seemed to have thought of something interesting and couldn't help but chuckle out loud. That idiot brother of yours fought for power with his majesty and ended up dying a violent death on the spot. Even a shrewd person like your mother doesn't dare to do anything that goes against his majesty. She only dares to hide in Renchuan Palace all day, eating vegetarian and praying to Buddha. Why are you so stupid? You actually want to ask your mother for help? Do you think that His Majesty will let you go on account of your sibling relationship? Do you think His Majesty is like me? When I was young, even if my favorite little snowball was killed by you, I didn't dare to say anything. I only dared to hold its body, secretly hid in a corner of the cold garden, cried for a whole night, and finally buried it. His Majesty found it hard to tolerate you back in Flat Mountain Town. Rong Yuhu pressed her face firmly and took out a blueprint from his bosom as if he was presenting a treasure. He handed it over to Rong Shanshan. Look, what is this? Do you still recognize him? Obviously, Rong Yuhu didn't expect Rong Shanshan to answer and continued excitedly, isn't the woman in the painting very beautiful? Look, do you recognize this ferret? Princess. The young palace maid cried out in alarm. She wanted to rush forward, but was stopped by several palace maids beside Rong Yuhu. Rong Shanshan raised her head with great difficulty and looked at the woman in the drawing who was dressed in plain clothes and had beautiful eyes. She saw that she was holding a familiar little ferret in her arms. I got someone to copy it. His Majesty has a painting that is 1,000 times better than this. Chapter 4496. His Majesty's painting of this woman looks like she's about to walk out of a painting. It's many times more realistic than this. Rong Yuhu clicked her tongue and put away the painting in her hand. I saw that you were so stupid, so I came over to give you a few pointers. Do you think you can still wait for His Majesty today? Let me tell you, His Majesty went to Lulin Courtyard. The second prince and his group are detained there. What do you think he's doing there? Rong Yuhu smiled wickedly. Now you understand, His Majesty doesn't care about your life or death. If you die, he'll marry your memorial tablet over. Whether you're alive or dead, you can't change your fate. Ha 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 ha. Rong Yuhu couldn't help but laugh wildly when she thought of this. Even the hand holding Rong Shanshan loosened a little. Princess Jiankong trembled all over and was finally able to prop herself up. She looked at her pitiful 9th sister, who had always followed her, as if she was looking at a stranger. This 9th sister had never dared to speak loudly in front of her. She had always been willing to be beaten and scolded. She didn't expect that she could be so crazy now. Rong Yuhu, you. Rong Shanshan tightly clutched the fan-shaped chair behind her, her eyes revealing a severe expression. You dare to insult the first daughter of the Empress, you still don't understand. Rong Yuhu suddenly roared, shocking all the palace maids present. Even Rong Shanshan was startled by her. You, are at the end of your road. Rong Yuhu pointed at her shoulder and poked and prodded. His Majesty doesn't want to see you at all, so he wants to send you far away to the wilderness. As she spoke, she giggled again and pushed Rong Shanshan down on the chair. She turned her head and called for the others to leave. Walking out of the pavilion, Rong Yuhu's footsteps paused, and she spoke coldly without turning her head. Stop acting, His Majesty won't return to the palace today, and he doesn't want to see you at all. Tomorrow morning, he will head to the Wang River. As for you, obediently follow that big black bear prince to the wilderness, ha 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 ha. Rong Shan Shan sat paralyzed in the pavilion, her eyes blank for a moment. Princess, princess. The little palace maid couldn't help but call her twice. Rong Shanshan abruptly pushed her away and stood up. She stumbled and slammed into a pillar at the side. Princess. Rong Yuhu's personal palace maid couldn't help but look back. The sound of crying and clamoring could be heard, and she could faintly hear the palace maid's heart-wrenching screams of "Princess! Princess, will something happen over there? Didn't I say just now?" Rong Yuhu curled his lips. Even if Rong Shanshan dies, the memorial tablet has to be married over. Besides, how could Rong Shanshan be willing to die? Her lips curved into a sly smile. Princess, was the painting you mentioned just now really painted by His Majesty? Did you send someone to copy it? A little palace maid about 12 or 13 years old could not help but ask softly. Rong Yuhu's personal maid turned around and glared at her. Don't talk nonsense. How is that possible? Rong Yuhu pursed his lips and smiled, it was just a coincidence. She then took out the painting from her sleeve and glanced at it. The woman in the painting has a great background. Oh. Rong Yuhu didn't say anything else. Instead, she pursed her lips and smiled, putting the painting back into her sleeve. Chapter 4497. She had already sent someone to investigate who the woman in the painting was. Speaking of which, it was really interesting. Who would have known that this Supreme Emperor of Tsang Prefecture was wholeheartedly in love with that Crown Princess of the Divine Province? The little white mink was being carried by the Crown Princess, which meant this little white mink was probably the Crown Princess' favorite pet. Rong Shanshan, this audacious bitch, almost hurt the little white mink. With His Majesty's fondness for that person, how could he allow her to continue being an eyesore in the palace? Moreover, His Majesty's loathing of the Rong siblings had long been expressed in words. Now that the Lu family had fallen, the monkeys had scattered, and Queen Dowager Lu was scared out of her wits and didn't dare to meddle in matters. Ha, only an idiot like Rong Shanshan couldn't understand the current situation. Why was the little white mink with His Majesty back at Flat Mountain Town? Rong Yuhu couldn't figure it out no matter how hard she racked her brains. But what harm was there in that? These questions already didn't seem that important. In any case, she had long wanted to remove this thorn in her side, Rong Shanshan. She was the one who courted death, so she couldn't blame anyone else. Green Forest Courtyard. The second prince sat uneasily on the stone stool, swaying left and right as if something was poking at his butt. He couldn't sit still at all. His Majesty has arrived. The junior eunuch's shrill voice immediately caused the frightened second prince to jump up. He turned around in trepidation and saw a tall and elegant figure slowly walking into the pavilion built by the water. The willows outside the pavilion were thin and the fragrance of lotus flowers lingered in the air. It was a beautiful scene. However, the second prince was drenched in cold and hot sweat. He was sweating profusely and did not even dare to raise his head. This subject greets your Majesty." The second prince suddenly threw himself to the ground and cried out tearfully, this subject deserves 10,000 deaths. I regret, I shouldn't have, listened to the whole family's slander and did such a thing that is worse than pigs and dogs. Your Majesty, spare me, spare me. Second royal brother, why are you so nervous? Duan Yu chuckled as he helped the second prince up and gently pressed him onto the stone stool. The second prince's body stiffened, and he found it hard to speak. He only felt that the hand on his shoulder was bone-chillingly cold, as if it had come from hell. It was a ghostly hand made of white bones. The second prince trembled like a sieve. Duan Yu patted him with a chuckle. Why are you so scared? Second Imperial Brother. The second prince wished for nothing more than to weakly slide to the ground. He barely propped himself up and exchanged a glance with Duan Yu. She only felt that the young man's peach blossom eyes were filled with a cold and heartless intent. He thought to himself that a young man from a lower star region had changed a lot during this period of time. Back then, this person wouldn't be like this. Just by sitting across from him, he could make people's hair stand on end. Could people really change so much? Have some tea, second royal brother. Duan Yu smiled faintly as he pushed a cup of warm tea in front of the second prince. The second prince stared at that cup of tea and knelt on the ground in fright. He repeatedly kowtowed and begged for mercy. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. This subject deserves 10,000 deaths, but please spare me on account of royal father. Second royal brother, what are you panicking for? Did you think that we poisoned your tea? Duan Yu smiled faintly and looked up at the person who was brought in from outside the waterside pavilion. Second Imperial Brother, look who's here. Chapter 4498. When the second prince looked up, he met the third prince's eyes, and both of them were startled. Third royal brother, quickly come sit next to us. Duan Yu waved his hand at the trembling third prince with a smile. Both of them were drenched in cold sweat, as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Drink tea. Duan Yu poured another cup for the third prince and pushed it in front of him. He looked at the second prince with a grin. Second royal brother, are you going to refuse us to our face? The second prince was scared half to death, and cold sweat poured down his forehead like a waterfall. I'll drink. The second prince picked up the teacup, but half of the tea in the cup was spilled out by his trembling hand. The tea spilled everywhere, and only a quarter of the tea remained in the cup. The second prince looked like he was going to sacrifice himself for a cause. He glanced at Duan Yu before raising his head and gulping down the rest of the tea. Third royal brother, it's your turn. Duan Yu pointed at the tea in front of the third prince. Your Majesty, second royal brother's rebellion has nothing to do with me. You can't wrongly accuse this official without any basis. The third prince's cold sweat also poured down in droplets. Ever since he was brought here from the estate, he had been considering countermeasures the entire time. The tragedy was that even after he walked into this waterside pavilion and saw His Majesty the Emperor sitting in front of him with a smile, he still didn't know how to save his life. This emperor of theirs looked young, but his methods were too vicious. The whole family's several dozen people were annihilated without batting an eyelid. Now, was it second royal brother's turn? But he really didn't participate in it this time. Could it be that this young monarch couldn't bear to see him stay out of it and insisted on dragging him into this mess as well? Third royal brother. Duan Yu looked up, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Are you going to defy the imperial edict and be disrespectful? The third prince gritted his teeth as he picked up the teacup with trembling hands and drained it in one gulp. He put down the teacup heavily, and when he looked up, he saw that the monarch had suddenly changed into a smile. His handsome face was filled with gentleness. That's right. He smiled and turned to look at the second prince, who was drenched in cold sweat. Second brother, you have committed a grave sin. Even I cannot forgive you. There were more than 700 of your followers. I thought they were all instigated by you, so I killed a few of their leaders. The rest were exiled to the land of thorns by me. When the second prince and the third prince heard this, they couldn't help but tremble. What kind of place was the land of thorns? That would be hell. Other than the endless desert and desolation, there were only thorns all over the ground. There were no other plants, no flowers, no food, no water. The scariest thing was that after being banished to the land of thorns, there was no way to return. There was a powerful heavenly Tao barrier in that place. Although they didn't know what it was, they knew one thing. If you go in, you won't be able to come back. In the land of thorns, anything could happen for a mouthful of food. There was no end to the wilderness, no hope, no light. This was the ultimate nightmare. Plop. A heavy thud landed on the ground. When the third prince returned to his senses, he turned to look and saw the second prince twitching on the ground, his limbs trembling non-stop. Your Majesty. The third prince looked back in horror. Chapter 4499. Colluding with the Ho family to privately build large batches of lightning bolts. Acting out of selfishness, he conspired to destroy Phoenix Emperor City's 12 main roads. We grant him an intact corpse. Duan Yu fiddled with the cup in his hand before suddenly smiling at the third prince. Third royal brother, we will be leaving the capital tomorrow. The third prince's entire body abruptly turned cold, and a chill emerged from the depths of his bones. Old Second took advantage of the fact that he was leaving the capital for Luyu Pass to secretly play some underhanded tricks. As a result, Old Second died, the Ho family also died. Not a single one of Old Second's retainers was saved. This cruel and sinister young monarch purposely called him here today to let him personally witness how he dealt with second royal brother. In the end, the third prince was supported out of Lulan Manor. Reportedly, when he left, he even tripped on the threshold, and his entire body was a bit limp. Your Majesty. Like a wisp of smoke, Ing lightly floated into the pavilion and called out softly. Duan Yu stood facing the water with his hands clasped behind his back. His gaze landed on the clear water in the pond, and he didn't turn around even when he heard Ying's call. Ing lowered his head and continued, news came from the palace that Princess Jiankong died just now. She died from touching a pillar. Duan Yu slowly turned around and stared coldly at Ing as he slowly reached out his hand. Ing quickly walked up and presented a communication jade talisman with both hands. He lowered his head and continued, Xiao sent the news. Earlier, the 9th princess and Princess Jiankong quarreled in the flower pavilion. Princess Jiankong suddenly touched the pillar, and the royal maids didn't react in time. She probably didn't react herself either. Duan Yu curled his lips, and his voice was endlessly cold. She originally thought that someone would catch her, but who knew that she really touched the pillar? The noble Princess Jiankong actually died in such an aggrieved and comical manner. She probably never imagined that she would have such an ending. With the 9th princess's cultivation, if she wanted to save her, she could. Ing coughed lightly and said, Xiao also said that the 9th princess secretly hid a painting. What painting? Ing took out a painting and bowed to hand it to Duan Yu. The latter reached out to take it, and a harsh glint flitted across his eyes after a glance. He angrily said, What kind of mess is this painting? The painting shattered into pieces, falling down like snow. Your Majesty, what about agreeing to the marriage alliance between the barbarian tribe and Kawa? Duan Yu was expressionless, but his voice was cynical. There are so many princesses in the current dynasty, just randomly pick one and send it over. His voice paused slightly, from what we see, Rong Yuhu should be the one. He's so scheming and likes to put on airs all the time. I heard that the Prince of Nuwa has many concubines. Send her over and let her get along with the prince's wives and concubines. Yes, Ing answered in a low voice. Seeing that she's done so many things, I'm sure she wants to replace you. I'll definitely be happy. Is that so? Your Majesty, are you sure? Find 2 shadow guards to follow her. Don't touch the pillar again. Duan Yu coldly ordered, we don't want to see her again on the day we return to the palace. Yes. Tomorrow, they would be able to leave this foul place. With a flash of light, Arbor's group flew out of the teleportation array. He's running away again. Mu Xiaoxue is pretty good at running. Sir Jojo lowered his head and looked at the communication jade talisman in his hand. 3 miles to the southeast. Everyone rushed into the teleportation talisman array again. The talisman array flashed many times, and the group ran back and forth about a dozen times. Princess Wuxia facepalmed. Arbor silently took out 10 sets of teleportation talisman arrays and coldly said, "They won't die of exhaustion." Chapter 4500. At first, Arbor really didn't expect Mu Xiaoxue's group to be so good at running like rats. After they ran back and forth to the main control room several times, they missed each time. Arbor silently left Baldy Tian in the main control room of the mausoleum and had him send her a message in time. Then, she led her group and chased after them. The little stoic and Mu Xiaoxue's group were completely at odds. She wanted to see how much resources Mu Xiaoxue had and whether her teleportation talisman matrix could be more extravagant than her. Exhaust them to death. She wanted to see if Mu Xiaoxue's heaven-rank charm master, Luo He, could replenish the teleportation talisman matrix's talisman energy in such a short time. Speaking of which, this Luo He and that elder Zhuang hid themselves really well. At the entrance of the mystic realm on the deserted island, these two people weren't with Mu Xiaoxue's group at all. Zhao Yi, Gui Xuan, and a few elders from the City of Shadows led Mu Xiaoxue, Lin Miao, and that group of old, weak, women and children. At that time, their battle lineup really didn't look like much. The appearance of this heaven-rank charm master, Luo He, was really a bit surprising. In addition to Elder Zhuang, this late-stage immortal venerable expert, the strength of Mu Xiaoxue's group increased by more than tenfold. Not only that, there was also a formation expert in Mu Xiaoxue's group who had deciphered 1/3 of the 9-palace maze formation. At this time, he was still in hiding like a venomous snake in the dark. No one knew when he would spring out to deliver a fatal blow. A charm master, an immortal venerable expert, and a great formation master. From the looks of it, it was quite a big show. What did Mu Xiaoxue and her group want to gain from this trip to the Tianji mystic realm? Arbor waved her sleeves lightly, and countless poison-tailed butterflies flew out from her sleeves and chased in all directions. Following that, the talismans drawn in the void were pasted one after another in the direction of the poison-tailed butterfly. They transformed into all kinds of ferocious beasts and birds of prey in the air, galloping and roaring as they flashed away. Princess Wuxia stood there in a daze for a long time. Then, she closed her mouth slightly. "Sister-in-law. What talisman is that?" "Heaven level 100 beasts talisman." Arbor frowned in dissatisfaction. Although the 100 beasts talisman produced many ferocious beasts, there were no dragons or phoenixes. There were no particularly strong ferocious beasts, so how could they chase after others? Princess Wuxia closed her mouth and mumbled, "It's already very good." This little sister-in-law was indeed a ferocious little fiend. The moment she made a move, she used dozens of 100 beast talismans drawn in the void. Together with the poison-tailed butterflies, they chased after Mu Xiaoxue and the others. Mu Xiaoxue must have had a few hundred lifetimes of bad luck. She had already told her not to provoke her sister-in-law, yet she still had to act like a little white flower. She had offended her sister-in-law. Given her sister-in-law's temperament, she would definitely not let Mu Xiaoxue off. "Sister-in-law, do you have any grudges with Mu Xiaoxue of the City of Shadows?" Princess Wuxia asked cautiously. Arbor glanced at her. "Resentment?" She shook her head. It wasn't resentment, it was hatred. Her mother had single-handedly manipulated this great hatred from the sins she had committed in 2 lifetimes. If she didn't properly repay this Hall Master Mu, she, Arbor, had truly lived in vain. An icy glint flitted through the little stoic's eyes, and she lowered her eyes and said, "Let's rest here first." Chapter 4501. She would let the 100 beast talisman track them for a while. Escape. She wanted to see where they could run to. At most, they would run around in circles in the Fecta secret realm. At the same time, Elder Zhuang, Luo He, and the others were in a sorry state. They had just come out of the teleportation talisman array and were about to enter it again. Luo He suddenly raised his hand and said in a low voice, "Wait. What is it?" Elder Zhuang asked in a low voice, his old eyes looking around vigilantly. "They didn't chase us." Luo He waved his hand. "I can't feel the flow of talisman energy. They must have stopped." Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Lin Miao sneered. "They must have used up all their teleportation talisman arrays. What do you know?" Luo He glanced coldly at the stupid woman. "The Crown Princess and the others were able to follow our teleportation talisman arrays and come here with great precision. That only means one thing. They must have a Heaven Realm Talisman Master among them who can make a directional teleportation talisman array," Luo He said with a dark expression. "As soon as they replenish their talisman energy, the array can start teleporting again. We have to take this time to rest. There will be a tough battle ahead." Lin Zhener was silent for a while, then said, "There are rumors that the Crown Princess is an extremely powerful talisman master." Lin Miao couldn't take it anymore. "Lin Zhener, I wanted to ask you before. Have you been scared out of your wits by that arbor? Why are you always on her side and speaking up for her? You even gave in to that woman and gave her 10 million spirit coins. You're a disgrace to the Lin family. Then what can you do if you don't give in to her?" Lin Zhener disagreed with her sister's words. "Can you crush others, or can you rebuke them back?" Lin Zhener couldn't do anything but argue with others. In the end, she still had to mediate and compensate them. Lin Zhener felt wronged. Did they think she was happy to clean up their mess? She had only lent a helping hand because of her junior sister, Mu Xiaoxue. "Stop quarreling," Zhao Yi suddenly roared and glared at the two of them. "Why are you quarreling all day long? Little junior sister is awake." Zhao Yi, who had wanted to scold Gu Yishuan, hurriedly turned around and ran over. He pushed Gu Yishuan away and reached out to take Mu Xiaoxue into his arms. He called out softly, little junior sister, how do you feel?" Mu Xiaoxue felt as if she had just returned from the gates of hell. Although she had opened her eyes, she could not speak or move her hands. She could only stare at Zhao Yi with her clear, snow-like eyes that were filled with anxiety and fear. Zhao Yi's heart was almost melted by her gaze. He reached out and gently hugged Mu Xiaoxue, as if a little louder could scare her to death. He said carefully, "Little junior sister, don't be nervous. It's okay, it's okay. The substitute curse on your body has already been removed by Master Luo. The life-reaping talisman still has some effect on you. You can only rest for a while. In another day, you will be able to speak. Don't be afraid, junior sister. I will definitely be by your side to protect you." Mu Xiaoxue glanced at him and a smile slowly appeared on her stiff little face. If Zhao Yi could look carefully, he would be able to see the disdain in his junior sister's eyes. It was disdain. Mu Xiaoxue was really annoyed with him and Gu Yishuan at this moment. Chapter 4502. All day long, they claimed to be her protectors, saying that they would protect her from harm. But the problem was, did they have that ability? With their pitiful cultivation, they couldn't even withstand a finger from the venerable peach blossom immortal by Arbor's side. Really, what could they use to protect her? They were all boasting. Men were all such untrustworthy dogs. They were useless. If they weren't strong enough, how could Xiao Shui be in such a miserable state? She was like a stray dog, running around in this secret realm. In fact, she had already woken up, but because she couldn't speak and didn't want to open her eyes, she pretended to be unconscious. In this secret realm, they had been running for a full day and 2 nights. They were like wild chickens and dogs that were being chased by their owners, and they fled miserably, pitifully, and in a miserable state as if they had nowhere to go. In more than 10 years, she, Mu Xiaoxue, had never been in such a miserable state. The City of Shadows Mu family's fourth miss, who had always lived elegantly and calmly, was intelligent, gentle, and knew how to use her intelligence to control and use men to get what she wanted. When had she ever been forced to be like a dog? Walking back and forth in this mystic realm, it was as if someone had slammed the door on him and beat him while he was down. Little junior sister, you must be hungry. Come, eat something first. Zhao Yi took out an oiled paper bag and helped Mu Xiaoxue up, letting her drink some water to moisten her throat. He then broke a steamed bun and fed it to her. Lin Miao watched coldly from the side and sneered. Lin Zhener immediately turned her head and gave her a warning look. Her meaning was very clear. You are now in the City of Shadows team, so you have to hold back your anger. Even if you have opinions about Miss Xiaoxue, don't say it out loud and anger everyone. Why are you glaring at me like that? Lin Miao lifted her foot and walked towards a big tree. I know my status. Why would I say anything about the City of Shadows little princess that you all love and protect? It's not like I have nothing better to do. Lin Miao rolled her eyes and was about to sit down beside the tree. Just as she was about to sit down, someone beside her shouted, Tiger Wolf Beast, there's a Tiger Wolf Beast. Ah. Tiger Wolf Beast. Lin Miao was startled and quickly summoned her long sword. Without even looking, she slashed towards the source of the sound. The sword slashed at the disciple who was wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf, and directly cut off a piece of flesh from his arm. The disciple immediately burst into tears, wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. Lin Miao, you. Why did you slash me? Lin Miao was also very surprised. She had clearly cut down a ferocious tiger wolf beast just now. Taking a closer look, the tiger wolf beast pounced from behind the disciple and bit his leg. What is it? The disciples of the City of Shadows who were resting all stood up in a panic. They drew their swords and sabers and slashed at the wolves, tigers, and leopards that besieged them. It seems to be an illusion. Fuck, it's an illusion. It was no wonder that when she swung her sword down, she missed and the sword edge sliced off a piece of flesh from that disciple. It turned out that these tiger wolf beasts did not have physical bodies at all. Luo, he said in a deep voice, everyone come behind me. This is the 100-beast talisman, it doesn't have a physical body. Chapter 4503. Without a physical body, what should we do? Can we only use all our spiritual power to attack? What will happen if we run out of spiritual power? While everyone was talking at once, their movements were also very fast. All of them gathered behind Luo He. Only the disciple left behind by Lin Miao was torn to pieces under the attack of several tiger and wolf beast phantoms. Mu Xiaoxue's face was full of grief and indignation, and her eyes were slightly accusing as she looked at Lin Miao who ran to her side. Seeing this, Lin Zhener's face showed a trace of embarrassment, and she quickly comforted her, little junior sister, Sister Miao didn't do it on purpose. She was just too scared, so she left junior brother and ran back by herself. Lin Miao looked down at Mu Xiaoxue and scolded in her heart, pretentious. But on the surface, she ignored Mu Xiaoxue and stood silently behind Lin Zhener. Was there something wrong with this woman's head? Lin Miao sneered in her heart, does she think I'm like her, surrounded by the halo of the Virgin Mary, shining with holy light everywhere and saving cats and dogs when I see them? What a joke, at the moment of life and death, it's good enough that she can run back with her own legs. She's just a woman who lies there and has people to serve and protect her. What right does she have to say that she's cold-hearted and doesn't know how to save her companions? What a joke. If this woman didn't have so many helpers around her, she wouldn't have to endure this ignorant woman again and again. Luo he took out a dozen Xianyin talismans from his pocket and threw them out. Streaks of baleful yin energy then pounced on the phantoms of tigers, wolves, and other beasts. Everyone's hearts were covered in cold sweat as they stared at the two concentrated forces colliding. Those phantoms of tigers and wolves wantonly grabbed and bit at the streams of yin energy, and for a moment, there was an inexplicable feeling of being evenly matched. On Luo He's forehead, cold sweat involuntarily dripped down. Mu Xiaoxue was burning with anxiety, and her fingers couldn't help but curl. If this situation continued, their situation would really be very bad. Master Luo, I think we should move as soon as possible. Zhao Yi hugged his little junior sister with both hands, and seeing her very pale face, he couldn't help but feel anxious. Little junior sister was really too pitiful. Look at how scared she was by that crazy woman. He couldn't bear to see his junior sister cry the most. The moment he saw her cry, he felt as if someone had dug out a piece of his heart with their fingernails. It was extremely painful. Little junior sister was such a weak and delicate girl. She should be raised in a boudoir and be provided with luxurious clothing and luxurious clothes. When she was free, she should play with flowers and play the zither. When she was busy, she should read books and learn how to write. She shouldn't have come to such a dangerous place, and she shouldn't have met a crazy demoness like Arbor. Zhao Yi gritted his teeth and said, this Arbor must be jealous of junior sister's talent and beauty. That's why he's trying to kill junior sister without any reason. Lin Muir and her best friend, Gu Yisin, looked at each other. She couldn't take it anymore and said, although I don't like Arbor, he's arrogant and unreasonable. Lin Muir threw away her sister Lin Zhener's hand that was tugging at her sleeve and continued with a mocking expression, but let me say something. Talent, beauty, and talent, I feel that the little princess of the City of Shadows is really not comparable to him at all. Chapter 4504. Would Arbor be jealous of someone who is inferior to him in every way? Lin Muir couldn't help but roll her eyes. She just thought that this senior brother Zhao was very ridiculous. She said this because she had been disgusted by him for the past few days. Now that she heard senior brother Zhao's strange remarks, she really couldn't help but want to refute him. Zhao Yi and Gu Yixuan had been carrying the useless Mu Xiaoxue here and there, taking good care of her all the time. Every day, they would talk about their junior sister, and the two of them would even fight over her. She felt very disgusted just looking at them. Her sister Lin Zhener was a woman, so it was more convenient for her to do everything. Zhao Yi and Gu Yixuan were just Mu Xiaoxue's senior brothers, not husband and wife. They didn't avoid suspicion and hugged each other all day long. It was really disgusting. Mu Xiaoxue didn't wake up before, so she didn't have the right to speak. At this moment, she had already woken up, but she seemed to have gotten used to the feeling of being served by her two senior brothers. She didn't feel at all that it was inappropriate for a young and unmarried woman like her to be hugged by a grown man like this on his lap. Was she used to being held by men like this? What a bitch, who knew who gave birth to her? It was said that Mu Xiaoxue wasn't the daughter of the first madam of the City of Light and Shadow. Her mother should just be a concubine. No wonder like mother like daughter. She didn't avoid suspicion at all. Today, she hugged this man, and tomorrow, she would be intimate with another man. It was really disgusting to watch. After Lin Muir finished speaking, everyone glared at her angrily. With this slap in the faces of all the men present were all swollen. Especially Zhao Yi, who said that Arbor was jealous of his junior sister, was refuted by Lin Muir's words. He was so angry that his eyes were wide open, and smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. Lin Muir. Are you looking for trouble? Look at your face along the way. You were neither cold nor warm to our junior sister. Our junior sister doesn't owe you anything. That's right. How can you insult people like this? What do you mean by inferior to Arbor in every way? How can Arbor compare to our junior sister? A group of brainless protectors of the City of Shadows caught Lin Muir and roared at her. Everyone was talking at once, making a lot of noise. Gu Yixin was dumbfounded. Previously, she had only heard her best friend, Lin Muir, casually mention it once or twice. Now that she had witnessed the blind protection of the disciples of the City of Shadows, she was simply speechless. Today was an eye-opener for him. Wait, how did you find out that the Crown Princess is not as good as your miss? Gu Yixin felt like she was about to die of laughter. Gu Yixuan's face darkened. He didn't give his sister any face at all. Gu Yixin, think carefully before you speak. Gu Yixin was both angry and amused. So, all the men here were Mu Xiaoshue's brainless admirers. Mu Xiaoxue was really something. Do you still have the time to argue with each other here? Luo he abruptly shook off several tens of talismans, and traces of blood faintly flowed down from the corners of his mouth. He couldn't help but shout angrily. He was fighting with his life on the line here, but these dregs still had the time to fight each other like dogs biting each other's mouths. If you don't want to live, then get out of the team. Luo he said coldly. No one here has the obligation to save your lives. The disciples of the City of Shadows who were scolding Lin Muir shut their mouths when they heard this. Zhao Yi glared fiercely at Lin Muir and turned to Luo he. Master Luo, there's no time. We must move as soon as possible. Chapter 4505. Luo he gritted his teeth and threw out dozens of dark yin talismans. At the same time, he turned around and threw out a teleportation talisman array that enveloped everyone. Let's go. Thump. 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 Everyone scrambled out of the talisman array and fell to the ground in a flurry. A young man shouted angrily, "You're stepping on my face. Get off me. What's going on? Why is this talisman array so bumpy?" Pfft. Luo he spat out a mouthful of blood, his face pale. He looked down at the shattered jade talismans in his hand, his face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Elder Zhuang reached out to support him and said in a low voice, "Meditate immediately and recover as soon as possible." Luo he didn't say much to him. His current situation was very bad. The continuous overdraft of talisman energy had pushed his body to a critical point. If he didn't recover soon, his talisman energy would probably dry up. Elder Zhuang stood up and glanced at everyone, then walked to Mu Xiaoxue and nodded respectfully at her. "Young miss, we need Grandmaster Mao Yang's help now." Mu Xiaoxue couldn't speak or move. She curled her fingers with great effort. Elder Zhuang nodded and apologized. He reached out and took off a blue crystal necklace from her neck. As the spatial container emitted a bright light, an old man in his 70s with white hair and a beard floated out. His cheekbones were high on both sides, and there was a trace of gloominess between his eyebrows. "Grandmaster Mao." Elder Zhuang cupped his hands and said, "Please set up a concealing defensive array here. Grandmaster Luo needs to recover." The old man named Mao Yang's eyelids fluttered slightly. He said with an indifferent attitude, "Even if I put in the effort to set up a concealing defensive array, it might not be able to escape his eyes. This mystic realm has a guardian. He knows the terrain and surroundings like the back of his hand. Do you think you old, weak, sick, and disabled people can escape?" A trace of anger flashed across Elder Zhuang's eyes. "Master Mao, don't forget the oath you made before you left the branch. You vowed to protect the young miss with your life." "Humph," Mao Yang snorted coldly, "I only need to protect young Mississippi, you." Old man Zhuang was amused by his lukewarm attitude. "Grandmaster Mao. That's enough." Mao Yang sneered and waved his hand. "For the sake of Miss, I'll help you again." He turned around and gloomily glanced at the many disciples of the City of Shadows. The disciples were swept by his gloomy gaze and couldn't help but secretly shiver. This old senior had come out once or twice before. According to junior sister, he was a very impressive array master. However, His gaze was so sinister and terrifying that no one dared to look him in the eye. Mao Yang stood in the middle of the crowd and glanced at everyone with malicious intentions. Suddenly, he flicked his fingers and several polished round crystals were sent flying into the air by the force between his fingers. A curtain of light shrouded the area and quickly covered everyone present. If someone was outside at this moment, they would definitely notice that the auras of the 100 people present were all concealed in an instant. It was as if all of them had sunk into the sea in an instant and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 4506. Arbor, Mo Yen, and the others walked out of the teleportation glyph array in a single file and circled the area twice. These people are quite good at hiding. Princess Wuxia looked around and said, could it be that they have escaped? They're still here. Arbor waved his finger and caught the shadow of 100-beast talisman. He said coldly and expressionlessly, they must be hiding in some kind of concealment array. Right here. She turned to look at Mo Yen. The latter nodded knowingly and waved her hand. The faint shadow drew an arc in the air like a floating silk ribbon and gently embedded itself in the air. Crown Prince Rong raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, this Prince Mo is too powerful. He found the concealment array with just a wave of his hand. Then, a black shadow leaped over. Everyone felt as if a few things had flown past their eyes. They were as fast as a few streamers of light. Then, they suddenly drilled into the concealment array. After a few seconds, the concealment array appeared in front of them. Mu Xiaoxue and the others were all sitting in the array. After removing the concealment aura, and Wuxia and the others saw that Mu Xiaoxue and the others were sitting in a transparent bowl. They were facing a gloomy old man in his 70s with white hair and beard across the defensive wall. Ding Yun and the others could see clearly now. What the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had hurriedly thrown in were a few seeds. Now, they were leaping up and growing among the crowd, quickly blossoming and bearing fruit. Their branches and leaves were luxuriant as they climbed up the defensive walls on all sides. After the wood spirit had climbed up the defensive wall, fine scratches had appeared on it. There were also a few cracks that were not very obvious. However, as the seeds in the array continued to climb, it seemed as if they were going to break through the defensive wall. The commotion woke up the disciples of the City of Shadows who could not calm down to meditate and recover. They jumped up in shock and hurriedly summoned swords and axes from their consciousness. They charged at the plants, vines, and stems that were crawling like snakes around them. However, these growing plants were born from the wood spirits. As long as the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal Saint power was endless, they would not be able to cut off these things no matter how hard they tried. With their cultivation and spiritual energy, there was a huge difference between them and a certain peach blossom. Once they met, it would be a bloody massacre without a doubt. Now that these people were all trapped in this concealment defensive array, their aura concealment had been removed, and their defensive power seemed to be unsatisfactory. As the array formation's aura gradually weakened, Old Man Zhuang couldn't help but frown and look at the array formation Grandmaster. Grandmaster Mao. Why are you panicking? Mao Yang sneered. She raised her hand, grabbed a random City of Shadows disciple, and slapped him hard on the head. Everyone was dumbfounded. Arbor's group wasn't the only one who was speechless. The disciples of the City of Shadows inside the array were the most frightened. Had Grandmaster Mao Yang gone mad? Does he even know how to differentiate between friend and foe? Was he a traitor that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess of the Divine Land had planted among them? What are you doing? Old Man Zhuang said angrily. Of course, he did not believe that Mao Yang would betray the organization. That was simply impossible. No one knew how terrible the consequences of betraying the patriarch would be. Don't be nervous. Mao Yang's eyes flashed with a maniacal smile. His gloomy face was filled with a strange expression. Can't you see that I'm trying to strengthen the array formation? Arbor glanced at the crazy old man and silently took out the mirror of misfortune from his pocket. Chapter 4507. Master. What are you doing, Master? Master. Zhao Yi was stunned. Zhao Yi's face twitched as he looked at Master Mao Yang, who seemed to have gone mad. This master was too scary. Suddenly, he twisted off a junior brother's head. Immediately, blood flowed like a river within the defensive formation, and the smell of blood filled the air. His junior sister, Mu Xiaoxue, was so frightened that she trembled in his arms. He could feel it, but he could only hug her tightly with both arms. Don't worry, junior sister. We'll be fine, Zhao Yi whispered to Mu Xiaoxue. Mu Xiaoxue's eyes were filled with fear. She struggled to roll her eyes and used her gaze to signal Zhao Yi to look at the ground. Zhao Yi screamed and quickly ran to the side with Mu Xiaoxue. He looked down and saw that a circular formation had appeared on the ground. Lines of small words were floating in the air. They were stained with blood and suddenly appeared in the formation. What's that? Holy shit! What kind of demonic array is this? It can even suck people's blood. The disciples of the City of Shadows retreated in horror. They looked at each other with stiff faces and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Mao Yang's actions were too frightening, especially when he tore apart a disciple of the City of Shadows without any explanation. Everyone present was terrified. Just now, they had all seen it clearly. When Master Mao tore apart the disciple of the City of Shadows, he did not hesitate at all. It was as if he was not tearing apart a person, but a chicken. Was it a chicken head or a duck head? Everyone sucked in a few breaths of cold air and took a few steps back. Being in the same team as such a crazy person, the sense of crisis was too strong. Because you did not know when your teammates would suddenly go crazy and tear your head off from your neck. Arbor looked at them hiding in a mess inside the defensive formation. He took out the mirror of misfortune from his sleeve without saying a word. He held the mirror of misfortune in his hand and stared coldly at the disciples of the City of Shadows. At this moment, the defensive formation in front of them began to change. As the blood flowed into the formation diagram on the ground and slowly gathered at the center of the formation base, the entire defensive wall began to gradually thicken. Sure enough, it's just as that old bastard Mao Yang said. He's using human blood to construct and strengthen this concealment and defensive grand formation. If the blood source continued to flow into the formation base, the formation in front of him would soon disappear into the air again. At that time, it would take a lot of effort to make it appear again. Arbor didn't want to waste any more time with these people. The little stoic turned her head to exchange a look with Prince Mo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. Then, she raised her hand and tossed it without any explanation. The pitch-black realm of misfortune suddenly emitted a soft black halo as it floated in the air. Suddenly, it crashed into a corner of the defensive wall and flew in with a whoosh. The disciples of the City of Shadows looked over in confusion. They saw that the bead was so black that it was translucent and glowing. At a glance, they could tell that it was an extraordinary item. He refined the heart of the mystic realm. Mao Yang and Elder Zhuang, who were separated by the defensive wall, had yet to react. When they saw the realm of misfortune break through the wall and smelled the unique aura of a mystic realm, they instantly became enraged, and their eyes turned red with rage. The little stoic casually took out a heart of a mystic realm. What was she doing? Could it be that she wanted to explode this mystic realm in front of them and let the destructive force kill all of them? You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.